magical circle covered him with a golden glow. The symbol spun until the space cracked and the body shattered into fragments. The light went out and a tiny winged girl appeared, hovering before him. His consciousness was filled with understanding. He was summoned to a world called Tesla. The scene collapsed into an empty white space, swarming with strangers in robes. He was shocked. He realized he was not alone. The cluster stretched endlessly through the void. Their confusion only grew. The rows hissed anxiously from panic, while the whisper spread further, confirming everyone was summoned without warning. He evened his breath and refocused, realizing that others were also stuck with him. A sudden force pressed his body from neck to bottom. Struggling changed nothing. A huge figure appeared and announced that they would be sent to Tesla. His command echoed, ordering those chosen to fulfill their assigned roles. A floating window appeared before him. It opened avatar settings, abilities, and items, and below rebirth while the timer ticked. The titanic figure ordered them to gather with those nearby. A nod, and without any restraints, they could already act as they wished. The power returned to his hands and feet. He could move again. In a moment, the figure vanished, leaving only quiet whispers behind. The echo of the announcement still lived in his thoughts as the confusion settled over the crowd. Nearby, several people began discussing their situation and agreed to introduce themselves. Among them, Recognition Awakenetsi realized that familiar voices had gathered together. There he confirmed the identities of everyone nearby, recognizing familiar faces from his world. Playful jokes about the light quickly escalated into a quarrel over names, attracting the attention of people nearby. He cut off the argument and ordered everyone to focus on their situation instead of fighting. Raising his hand, he pointed to the floating panels visible before each person and to the timer above. As the number steadily decreased, he concluded that they were pressed by a strict time limit. He glanced at the pop-up screen and warned others not to rush into reincarnation. There were options with avatars, abilities, and items. A detailed status panel appeared with character parameters and settings, like in a game interface. Gathering his companions, he suggested they act as they once did in their old guild. Memories of their former team, Nine of Dawn, strengthened their resolve. But when someone questioned his overly cautious approach, doubts flared up. He noticed that others calmly examined their windows and discussed options, without panic. Someone's eyes even sparkled. They looked as if ready to accept the order and go to Tesla without any hesitation. No matter the mood, he decided, gathering information was more important than celebrating. Carefully, he studied the character screen, noting stats, abilities, and the limited number of available points. Then he noticed the skill descriptions were vague, so the choice of weapons and leveling path became unknown. He gathered everyone and explained. One skill would not be enough. A balance between abilities was needed. After talking with others, he learned people were summoned from many countries, not only from Japan. Another discovery happened as soon as they realized they could understand each other despite different origins. Shock spread when it became clear they spoke an unknown language and did so as if it was normal. Yet despite this, there was no clear connection linking all present, and each of them remained a mystery. Stunned by the thought that his identity would be rewritten, he could not fully comprehend what was happening. When they calmed down, the group agreed to share everything they had managed to learn about abilities. He suggested assembling a balanced team with different roles, instead of choosing identical classes. Roles were quickly proposed. They divided magical support and frontline combat duties among them. He accepted Canon focused on magic, as long as her arguments supported this path. Then he admitted that he did not want to confine himself to a strict support role just for the sake of balance. Imagining the enemy breaking through the front line, he wondered what would happen if their formation collapsed. Tension grew as doubts surfaced whether they relied too much on fixed roles, like in games. In the end, he chose a balanced setup, firmly deciding to master both magic and everything else. He chose to become a versatile character, seeking balance rather than overpowering everyone. After distributing points, he completed the formation of the Quarter Angel race, a race with abilities suitable for both combat and support. Memories of helping near the sanctuary and training in martial arts shaped his decision. Soon several people flashed with light and disappeared as soon as they chose reincarnation. When the timer was running out, he checked. Everyone was ready to press the last option. When they started talking about the reincarnation location, he felt uneasy because of the sudden choice of Tranquista Castle. While he looked out the window again, he was tormented by the question, how was this decision made so quickly? Looking more closely at the description of the castle, he became even more worried but could not explain why. Canon admitted something about this was strange and realized that he did not feel doubts when alone. Watching the crowd, he understood many follow someone without noticing it. When the timer went down, his hands trembled and he searched with his gaze in his own window for answers. Among his abilities appeared an unfamiliar blessing. Barely managing, he frantically readjusted everything and chose a different location for reincarnation. Turning to his friends, he apologized and admitted that he could not follow the same path as they did. Despite confusion and protests, he still decided to trust his own instincts. Light engulfed his body earlier than anyone could stop him, and this confirmed his reincarnation. System messages, flashed abilities flickered, racial bonuses and items were distributed. His body was restored, and the transfer to the southern village of the Karam Empire was confirmed. A noisy summoning spot faded, while the figure manager silently watched with quiet interest. He woke up alone on the forest floor, and around him stood trees instead of a village. Realizing that it was not a dream, he checked his magical costume and asked himself why the place was so unexpected. Hiding his eyes from the sun, he moved toward the brightest glow. Standing on the cliff summit, he surveyed the endless Tesla Valley and began his solitary journey. Open wooden gates show a quiet mountain village. This is how his path begins. The healer hooded steps over the threshold while former companions exit. There is no guard at the entrance. This slightly eases his tension. Ahead stretch lively streets beneath carts and wooden houses. He was comforted by familiar human faces, and simple buildings gave him the thought that he would not stand out too much. The girl with cat ears suddenly appears. He is struck by shock but quickly pulls himself together and moves forward. Outside the city alone, he tries to open the status screen, but nothing appears on the screen. He focuses on the fact that certain eye abilities may be needed, so he admits, right now he lacks the means. Decided not to act blindly but to gather information, asks a villager where books are sold. The man explains that magical texts are rare here, but still recommends the general store. Recalling spells that were once recorded as items, he regains confidence and resolutely moves on to look for them. He considers whether he has enough remaining coins to buy magical books. In the general store, shelves are bursting with goods, and the owner greets him from behind the counter. After asking about magical texts, he learns that several of them can be bought. The shopkeeper shows a small assortment and explains the difference between everyday and spherical-type magic. Carefully examining the titles, he recognized water and fire spells and understood that these are combat techniques he can master. As soon as he touched the magical book with light, a sharp reaction ran through his whole body as if something connected his hand with the pages. Realizing he has a talent for light, he calmly asks about the price, simultaneously counting how many coins he has left. The shopkeeper notices his inexperience and questions him, closely studying his behavior. Finally smiling, the man offers a brief explanation about magic, and along with it a lantern spellbook. He restrains himself. He continues negotiations and sees the matter through to the end, securing books and several useful tools for himself. Leaving the shop, he reviews everything he has learned about magic, currency, and daily life in the village. In a moment, a large stone building appears in view. The Adventurers Guild is visible. Nervous but composed, he enters and heads to the reception desk. The receptionist greets him and gives him an application form. He studies it carefully. After confirming his data as a user of light magic, he fills out the document and suddenly realizes, in this world, paper is considered a luxury. He decided to hide his past. He chooses a new name and registers as Rook. The reception explains the guild's ranking system and the duties expected from members. As a newcomer, he receives a wooden F-rank card, marking his starting point. Looking for work right now, he asks what orders are available and what he can take. She recommends a shallow southern dungeon suitable for beginners, and he leaves with a firm intention to rush into battle there immediately. He rents a room at Forest Lodge, paying 6 silver coins for 3 nights. While he talks with the innkeeper, he notices how her animal ears twitched, and this confuses him. Ford, trying not to lose his temper, asks about dinner and offers payment. The smell of cooking fills the air as she returns to work, and he is puzzled by this unfamiliar sight. Later, he walks down the dark corridor to his room on the 2nd floor and reflects on the strange world surrounding him. Reaching his assigned room, notices the low level of technology in the village before sliding the door open and entering. The narrow passage and cramped bed surprise him, but he goes inside and does not complain. Collapsing onto the mattress, he reminds himself, this is only a place to rest. Then exhaustion quickly overwhelms him, and he recalls how all this had thoroughly knocked him off his feet. When memories of his reincarnation surface, he decides to remain cautious and not attract attention. Lying in bed, he contemplates the break with his former comrades and thinks about what steps to take next. Assessing his capabilities, he decides, first to learn magic and only then to seek allies. Encouraged by the spells he bought, he pulls out the lantern magic book. At first, he holds himself confidently opening, thinking that reading will be easy. Instead, the pages are filled with unfamiliar letters, and he realizes that he cannot comprehend a single word. Holding the book, he felt a sudden heat spread throughout his body, and it threw him off balance. The pages flared up but left no burn marks. Unconsciously, he raises his hand and calls for light, testing a spell he barely understands. A glowing sphere ignites above his palm, a sign that the magic worked. Overwhelmed with joy, he proclaims his victory too loudly, and immediately after, a swift embarrassment follows. Morning comes almost immediately. He wakes up with a heavy head and realizes that it was not a dream. That evening, the villagers celebrate his magic, urging him to drink as he awkwardly accepts their praise. Encouraged by alcohol and conversation, he gathers useful information about a nearby dungeon. The next day, taking simple supplies with him, he leaves through the southern gate and follows the path. Ahead emerges a cave exactly as he had heard in the story. Its entrance is dark and ominous. Sneaking in, he steps over the threshold, reminding himself that only weak monsters await inside. In the cave, he understands. The complexity of the dungeon is determined by local measures, and then he notices several branching paths ahead. Uncertainty grows as he assesses the risk of an ambush, and he forcefully tries to choose a safe direction. Pressed by doubts, he retreats outside and decides to withdraw for now. Reminding himself that he is not a hero, he chooses to move forward slowly, placing caution above pride. Returning from the dungeon, the young healer admitted that the very first crossroads troubled him. Encouraged by that advice, he gathered all the necessary items and decided to try again, relying on his own intuition. In the dark tunnel, the lantern's spell lit the stairs, and the sight calmed his heart. He recalled forgotten tools and laid out his things more carefully than before. Thankam and Collected marked the path, chose the correct route, and moved toward the sharp turn ahead. A dead end, he examined the wall to make sure nothing was hidden there. Without warning, a sticky creature fell and hit him. He immediately deflected the blow and sent the amorphous body onto the stone, splashes flying until it stopped moving. Recognizing slime in this, he stopped with relief after a brief struggle. When the remains dissolved, a radiant magic stone appeared and he kept it as proof of his first victory. The middle path proved correct. It showed another step descending deeper, while the left corridor ended in vain. And as he moved forward, it occurred to him how dungeons absorb defeated monsters and leave behind items. The widened corridor allowed him to swing his weapon freely, and for a moment added some confidence. Sudden footsteps thundered ahead, and from the darkness, a small figure sprang up and jumped out. The goblin lunged at him sharply, raising its weapon, forcing him to timely take a stance and recall the advice given to him. The goblin charged forward, but he grabbed it and slid aside, ending up behind. With a decisive swing, he struck it on the head, and the creature fell to the ground. Carefully observing, he confirmed. It no longer moved, and he steadied his breath. Examining the body, he noticed its features and reminded himself, this is not a game. Later, the body dissolved, leaving a larger magic stone, which he collected while pondering how his power grows. After the battle, light clung to him and surged throughout his body, filling him with warmth and strength. The enlightenment struck as soon as he realized he had leveled up. Soon another goblin emerged from the darkness, and he prepared without any hesitation. He quickly defeated it, noticed a dead end, and felt hope growing. Since he understood that with experience he could become stronger, he smiled and finally felt confident that he could survive in this world. At the deepest level, he pushed heavy doors and felt. Behind them was the boss's office. In the chamber, a lone goblin stood waiting between stone columns. Recognizing him as a knife goblin, he straightened up and decided to let him attack first. When the blade lunged to the side, he kicked the goblin's arm aside and deflected the strike. In response to the opening, he struck with full force with a sharp swing. He threw the goblin so that it crashed loudly onto the floor and lay silent across the room. After defeating the goblin, he simply froze over the body. He couldn't shake the feeling that the fight had ended too cleanly. The sound of a bell drew his gaze to a larger magic stone lying on a pedestal. A book lay nearby, and as soon as he glanced at it, its title flashed in his mind. He could not read the text, but understanding surged within him. He recognized it and realized the healing magic truly activates. So for the first time, he agreed to a reward for clearing the dungeon. In the guild department, he received 4 bronze coins and 1 silver coin for the magical stones. Loans, considering how the parties share the profits, he compared it to working alone. He learned about the resource center with samples of herbs and reference books. Knocking, he entered quietly, surprised that these materials were freely accessible. An employee reminded him to treat the resources carefully and not to take anything out of the room. In the resource center, he came across more books than expected. Everything was arranged like in a school library. Searching the shelves, he found volumes about magic and monsters instead of herbs. Sitting at the table, he read about the country, its systems, and the wider world. Who went through all this, studying politics, competitions, monsters, and magic in detail. Later, he noticed that Holy Lightspell disappeared from the list, and remembered the deep blue book from the dungeon. Recalling the legend of ancient heroes, he suspected that Holy Light does not belong to the 6 ordinary elements. Since considering his chosen race, he wondered if this affinity explains the rare spell. Later in the tavern, the senior traveler explained that in novice dungeons they give 1 reward for affinity. He heard and, listening carefully, understood. Such gifts are meant to help beginners at the very start. The veteran recalled his own former reward and realized, early advantages do not necessarily mean that the power will last forever. In the tavern, the veteran explained that a failed upgrade broke the equipment so badly that it could no longer be repaired. He listened carefully, firmly deciding not to rush into dangerous enhancements. After conversations with drinks time and again, he gathered fragments of knowledge that he inquired from the experienced traveler. The day entered its usual rhythm. In the morning he studied, and in the dungeon hunted goblins and eventually reached a promotion to E rank. After purchasing the Lightball spellbook, he tested the magic in battle and saw how the shining attack hit without missing. After he saw the bloody result of his magic, he was shaken by the realization of its real power. Doubt crept in while he was thinking whether he could strike without hesitation if the opponent was a human. Later the veteran explained that this internal struggle was the first wall the pioneer traveler saw in his face. He warned that survival sometimes requires tough decisions and iron resolve. So listening carefully, the young healer understood. Someday he would have to decide whose side he would stand on when lives were at stake. The veteran admitted, betrayal once drove him to despair, making him doubt what it truly means to be a traveler. Interested in the ancient relics involved, the young healer inquisitively pressed him for details. During a drink, the older man slowly agreed to tell the story. He called the artifacts treasures of incredible value and power spoils pursued by those seeking wealth or dominion. Among them were legendary weapons and holy instruments, some tied to the ruins beneath the great water city. While studying at the guild library, he pondered how real this world seemed and decided to explore it fully. A sudden flash disturbed his thoughts. He rushed into the corridor and hurried to check. One floor below, underground travelers carried in a severely wounded man, while others desperately called for help and healing. Seeing blood and panic, he froze for a moment, realizing someone's life depends on immediate action. The girl with cat ears rushes headlong through the village, begging for help for her fallen comrade, her hands covered in blood. The villagers gather around the doctor, who kneels beside the motionless boy and orders everyone to keep him just as still. The wound opened, revealing deep internal injuries, and the healer immediately understood the danger. The elder confirms, no potion in the village can restore organs pierced by such a brutal wound. When church magic weakened and no higher means remained, the priest explains that healing magic can be used by few, and only those who have access to high-ranking parties. The young healer hesitates, weighing the risk of revealing his ability and the consequences if it fails. When the girl clung to Dan's broken flesh, he realized, if he did nothing, it would haunt him for life. He, stepping forward, admits that he can use a little healing magic and offers to try. Sitting by the wound, he steadies his breath and begins to focus all his strength. The doctor directs his magic into Dan's chest, releasing deadly concentrated light over the wound. The beam spreads through the body as torn flesh closes, blood stops and his strength slowly but inexorably fades. Seconds pass, breath returns to Dan. The treatment worked in time. The peasants freeze in amazement, then surround the doctor with sincere, open gratitude. Embarrassed by the praise, he modestly denies and says he only did his duty. The healer realizes he applied advanced healing without any spell. Later, the saved swordsman sits at the table and sighs with relief, alive, and thanks the healer. The girl with cat ears introduces herself as Mel and talks about her connection to the wounded leader of the victims. From the stairs, another companion insists they must properly introduce themselves and say where they come from. Lucky and Dan express thanks, and the healer finally names himself Rook, thus starting a new connection. But Rook admits he has not yet joined any party and is considering going alone. This shocks the others. Dan asks why the skilled mage remained without companions. Rook says he can fight and has martial arts training. He doesn't understand what the problem is. Lakey notes that mages in close combat attire usually travel alone. It turns out to be a misunderstanding, and Rook stands embarrassed because of his strange fighting style. Rook understands others might have misunderstood his unusual magic and appearance, so he quietly, awkwardly looks away. In the guild hall, travelers discuss his abilities, his healing power, and whether he belongs to any team. Den suggests that if Rook hesitates about traveling alone, he should join their group. Mel supported this idea, believing that his healing abilities would significantly strengthen their team. Suddenly bent by the unexpected proposal, Rook asks for time to think before answering. Morning light falls on the quiet room as Rook prepares to leave the village. He goes downstairs and greets Mel, thanking her for the hospitality after yesterday's events. Outside, she praises his skill and invites him to come by any time while he explains that he plans to leave today. In the guild hall, his companions greet him warmly and ask how he made his decision. Then, after a short pause, Rook accepts their offer and agrees to join the party. Rook firmly shakes the hand and puts a period in the decision, taking responsibility as the party's healer and looks hopefully at the journey together. Before departure, he asks for some time to properly say goodbye around the village. He thanks those who hid him and expresses gratitude for their kindness during his short stay. The villagers give him advice and support, reminding, be careful on the road. At the meeting point, Rook greets his employer and prepares to start his first journey together with the squad. While the cart rolls, Rook learns their employer trusts the Mel family, and this secures the request for this escort. Before leaving for good, he visits Hans, who meets him just outside the village. Rook bowed low and expressed sincere gratitude for the guidance he received for the first time upon arrival. Hans reminds him, every journey begins somewhere and growth is born from moving forward. With a final warning to be careful because of his unusual magic, Hans watches as Rook moves off toward his new path. Near the village gates, Rook watches Hans walk away and feels the weight of farewell settle on his heart. Doubt rises in him, and he briefly thinks of running back to ask about the secret that shrouds his magic. Instead, he dismisses hesitation, apologizes to the comrades who were waiting. Two wagons rolled down the mountain pass, Rock led them and the rest left their village behind. The road stretched further and the village disappeared from view. Lackey sat silently and listened as the squad continued moving forward. The sentries' positions were rearranged along the caravan. Mel looked uneasy, but no one stopped. Attention shifted to Lackey's distant behavior, which others quietly assessed. Ignoring the remarks, Lackey continued to watch intently as the road went on. As the wagon rolled on, Lackey asked why there were no official maps for their route to Langford. Dats restrained the horses and kept pace. He recalled that the books only had simple sketches. They marked landmarks and intermediate places between main locations. Dats explained that accurate maps were controlled by rulers to prevent enemies from obtaining vital information. Mel added that some merchants and families created private maps for travel. It was as if he spoke of distant empires, yet none in this group recognized those names. As the caravan moved on, Lockie paused for a moment in thought, imagining distant lands and wondering what happened to those he left behind, whether they were safe. Suddenly, a glowing magic circle flared up. It buzzes with energy, then releases a sharp flash of light. 5 strangers appeared within the circle, standing barefoot and looking around confusedly. Clerics in the luxurious hall praised the successful summoning, welcoming the arrivals. Realizing they were in a building resembling a church, the summoned looked around confusedly and glanced around fearfully. In the spacious hall, the clergy solemnly greeted the summoned group as heroes led by the divine itself. The old ruler introduced himself as the Emperor of the Azal Empire and addressed them from his throne. The newcomers understood that they were standing in a royal palace connected to the name of the empire. Officials revealed that the country had come under invasion by a powerful enemy. The summoned were asked to give their power and save the nation. The mentioned group accepted that there was almost no choice left, and they were led to rest. Later, in a private chamber, one official reported to the emperor. The heroes had been instructed, and now they were resting. The emperor asked if anyone had a sacred title, but no one was found to have one. Although their names coincided with the prophecy, doubts about their completeness did not disappear. The investigation showed one person did not appear. Perhaps this was the true bearer of the holy name. The emperor acknowledged the absence of the saint and decided for the second time to rely on the religious state. The caretaker, bowed and said that there was another matter requiring attention, and this increased the ruler's anxiety even more. Far from here, the hand group settled by the fire after hours of travel, discussing how exhausting the rear guard was. Mel sharpened her keen senses, and Lakey's reconnaissance skills earned quiet trust from the others. After resting, the caravan prepared to move again across the endless plains. Before setting off, Ladia stopped and reconsidered an old incident with a monster, adjusted his equipment, and decided to stay alert. Grimm explained that monsters rarely came out of the nearby forest, so the previous attack was unusual. The group agreed to stay on guard until the end of the journey, reaffirming their team cohesion. Their party's name was mentioned, and for a moment the mood lightened, although the tension remained. Suddenly, movement ran across the plains, and Grimm ordered to stop the cart as the threat approached. Grimm ordered everyone to keep the wagons under siege, while a giant horned monster rushed over the plains towards them. Raising a shield, Grimm gritted his teeth and charged straight at the creature. The monster lunged forward, hooves tearing the ground, but Grimm held his position and forced it to slow down. At his signal, Lakey and Mel rushed from the sides, weapons ready. Their coordinated strikes pierced and sliced the beast, stopping its attack with one decisive blow. The first beast fell under their coordinated assault. Rock realized this was his first real battle against this party, and paused for a moment, afraid he would break their rhythm. Seeing the second monster approaching, he understood. There was no time to wait for the others. Determination displaced doubt as he chose to act in the unexpected situation. Focusing magic, Rock gathered light in the core and prepared a spell to stop the creature rushing at them. Rock fired a concentric ball of light at the charging beast as it approached the wagons. The blow threw the monster back, and its stunned companion froze, unable to believe its own eyes. After the healer cast light spell, he suddenly became seriously concerned about its power. His companion praised the might, and the healer silently froze in surprise. While they were walking, she guessed that there was a hidden trick in this spell. The discussion continued with special traits that can enhance magic. He remembered how the caster's state could affect the results, but the timing seemed wrong. Later, dismantling L-Sheep for materials, he came across the harsh truth of adventures. One had to fight it. Mel stated that it was his responsibility for the autopsy, reminding them, This was their agreed move, although he hated this job. After the fight, she quickly checked Dan for injuries, unable to hide her anxiety. Embarrassment overwhelmed as soon as her worries were noticed, but concern for the group was obvious. When the escort resumed, they arrived at Langford just before sunset. But inside the city, tall buildings grew around them while she proudly presented it as her hometown. Mel asked to say his impression as soon as they stepped onto the stone road. At the entrance, they unloaded the luggage while he admitted, "This place looks magnificent even compared to his southern village." Dan thanked the client for understanding, and for paying the escort, and the L-sheep were handed over to him. Mel waved goodbye to Uncle Grim before leaving the shop. After that, the group agreed to visit the guild and report on the completed order. Ruck realized the guild building looked almost the same as in his southern village, and Mel explained that the similarity was intentional. She added that common designs help travelers easily recognize guild homes even when they travel between cities. Inside, the reception met Dan and accepted their mission report. The confirmation went through, and the reward for the escort and the 2 L-sheep was prepared. They were informed that local lords assign rewards for monster control and maintaining public safety. After submitting the report, the group discussed how Banshee give adventurers the opportunity to earn extra money by hunting monsters. Walking through the city at night, Ruck noticed lively street stalls selling items far better and more diverse than in his village. He compared the square to a flea market and learned that many items were collectible curiosities or discarded finds. The stall owner unfolded rare goods from the dungeon and drew attention when he showed an unusual book. As soon as Ruck touched it, he felt a connection and understood. This is a blue magical book for cleansing. Ruck confirmed that the book was genuine and impatiently asked its price, trying to remain calm. The merchant insisted that it was a rare high-level magical book and set the price at 200 gold coins. Mel glanced warily and Ruck realized he would never afford such a price. Then she stated that these items looked like cheap pieces from a dungeon and offered only a few silver coins. The merchant resisted, claiming that even worthless goods require effort to obtain. Mel carefully examined the goods, pointing out damaged edges and ordinary stones. Under the pressure of her arguments, the merchant reluctantly agreed and sold everything together for 1 gold coin. After leaving, Ruck found out valuable magical books never appear at ordinary street stalls. Although the deal seemed fair, he quietly believed that the blue magic book was genuine. Mel, satisfied with the deal, ordered him to leave the purchase, unaware of the book's true nature. As soon as Rook entered the inn, unbearable fatigue overwhelmed him and he fell asleep almost instantly. Lying in bed, he was replaying the long day in his head and thinking about the magic book he was going to review later. Morning came, he woke up early and fighting sleepiness went downstairs. There he greeted Lakey, noticing how natural mornings feel for travelers. While they waited for Dan, an awkward silence hung between them, and Rook was overwhelmed with memories of his uncertain moments from the past. Lucky asked Rook to help wake Dan and he agreed, admitting that teamwork was still difficult for him. He wondered if Dan was really that hard to get moving, sensing Loki's hesitation. Despite the awkwardness, Rook insisted he has to fit in as a new member and support the team. Eventually Dan joined them, greeted everyone, and Mel cheerfully asked about the morning. They discussed plans for the day, deciding to visit the guild in the armory, and Mel suggested a small welcome gathering for Rook. Rook was surprised the healer knows how to use a spear. He explained that he once lived in a small mountain village and trained alone, honing a balanced fighting style. Fascinated by this, she insisted on sparring, while he hesitated against her real combat experience. Their companions return without urgent assignments and without news of strange monsters. While there was still time, they began repairing equipment and preparing spears for Rook. As they walk through the city, the group lively grills the usual blacksmith. The workshop is simple but reliable as always. A restless thought pierces Rook. He feels a personal connection between Dan and this place. They reach Gildan's smithery and ask for repairs, introducing the new companion. The blacksmith warmly welcomes Rook, learning that he is a healer who joined the squad. Rook immediately realizes Gildan is Dan's father, and the true reason for the visit is revealed. Inside the smithy, Gildan angrily approaches Dan and demands explanations about a past injury that nearly ended in death. Daniel acknowledges the danger but insists he understood the risk, while others feel he concealed details. Grateful for Rook's help, Gildan offers him any item from the shop as thanks. Dan urges him to accept the gift while they discuss the repair. Next, finding himself among weapons and armor, Rook stops and thoughtfully weighs their price and considers what exactly to choose. Rook compares 2 spears, weighing their weight and balance before settling on the one that suits him better. Mel explains, rare items known as floaters equipment that occasionally appears on the market with unusual qualities. Recalling an ancient battle, Rook reduces the minimal impact of Dano's shield to the possibility that a hidden special effect may be behind it. They ask if other Gurchai have the same features, but no clear evidence appears. Eventually, Gildan agrees to finish and sharpen the chosen spear. Rock presents Gildan with a worn dagger, he carefully examines its shape and condition. Finally, after inspection, Gildan finds out the blade carries a paralysis effect. Hearing that it has a price, Rook reacts sharply in surprise and begins to take more interest in the evaluation method. Gildan says that experienced masters can identify items related to their craft by touch and experience. So as he thinks about it, Rook begins to understand how knowledge in this world allows one to assess hidden qualities. After visiting the blacksmith, the team inspects Langford, and later arranges a warm meetup evening for Rook at night. During the celebration, Dans drinks non-stop, brushing off any warnings, while Rook tries not to fall behind. Others explain that Dan feels pressure every time he returns home. They explain to him that inheriting the business will trap him in a cage, and other paths force him to leave the city. Moved by this, Dane again confirms his choice to become a traveler and protect Langford in his own way. That night, Rook does not sleep, lying with eyes wide open and recalling Dan's struggle, comparing it with his own past. He remembers growing up in the temple in Dogo, and no matter how much he trained, he could not match his brother's talent. He could not inherit his family's path, and then, through a game that turned his life upside down, he broke into another world. Holding a sharpened dagger, he studies its promised effect and thinks about how to activate it. Focusing magic as if on healing spells, Rook tries to awaken the hidden power of the blade, its paralyzing effect. Rookchannel infused his magic into the dagger, and a faint purple glow barely flickers on the blade. He tests the movement and imagines how paralysis could affect an enemy struck in such a state. Realizing that the right timing is needed, he says, "You have to strike with a swing and at the same time send magic." Then he shifts his gaze to the spellbook from Purify, examining it to determine its true nature. The same percentage of magic turned out to be broader than expected, so Rook decides to carefully check its effect. Rook tests cleaning on a dirty towel. Rook watches as the light contracts near his hand, while the stain disappears instantly. White particles rise and dissolve, and even the sheets beneath him begin to become clean. This shocks him. He notices the spell spreading beyond the target and realizes the effect is broader than he expected. Determined to fix everything, he tries to clean the entire area, but the magic continues to consume power. When the flow finally subsides, Rook notices how much energy he has lost and feels anxiety. Lying on the bed, Rook reflects on how the scale of cleaning changes the amount of magic spent. He notices even hidden dirt was removed earlier. Considering practical needs, he wonders if cleaning only the surface of his own body will reduce expenses. Before putting it on himself, he tests the spell on his bag, confirming that the contents inside remain untouched. Satisfied with the result, Rook applies Purify to his body, carefully controlling the flow of magic. Rook checks himself after applying Purify and makes sure that his body and shirt are completely clean. He notices that the hair has become smooth, and the stickiness that was there before has disappeared. The relief changes with excitement as he realizes daily life will become much more comfortable thanks to this spell. Joyfully, he jumps on the bed, but a sharp movement scatters white particles into the air. Elrat slips through the front line and rushes to Rook as soon as the formation breaks apart. Luke quickly approaches, sharply thrusting the spear forward. The strike pierces the creature mid-charge and instantly stops it. When the threat retreats, the group gathers and reflects on the weakness in their own defense. Training is shifted to imaginary scenarios to practice positioning and maintain calm under pressure. Practice continues, a conversation about risk control and smarter coordination. After training, Mel is suddenly overwhelmed by a wave, and she breaks into tears while others lightly tease her. Then Luke dissects the monster with his bare hands to study its structure. Blood darkens his fingers as he focuses on learning. Noticing his condition, Mel approaches closer and offers to wash his hands. She casts a small water spell. A droplet swirls around the fingers, washing away the blood. When the water disappears, Luke involuntarily shudders with surprise. He realizes that Mel can now reliably use magic. On his day off, Luke sharpens the cleansing magic on his own. Later, Mel approaches him with a serious face and calls his name, distracting him from his routine. Meeting his gaze, she directly points out his strange cleanliness despite continuous battles and cuts. Others listen as she asks how he manages to have neither smell nor trace after holding monsters. Embarrassed by the misunderstanding, the group realizes her concern was only about hygiene. And Mel scolds the others for their stench, insisting that they think about how it affects someone with sharp senses. Luke quietly remembers a friend from his old world, the one who lifted everyone's spirits in tense moments. Inside there is an underground corridor. Nearby wolves tighten the ring around the pen and pull up from the front. And then one monster stealthily slips past and reaches the rear line, throwing the formation into chaos. The elf archer freezes, aligns the aim, and releases an arrow. The wolf falls, not managing to strike again. The group discusses the fight and notes. The elf's bow shooting most likely grew not from recent progress but from past experience. Tension rises as fear spreads among the members, and the bishop's previous anxiety proves justified. Apologies are made, and the mood softens as soon as they agree to continue working on improvement together. There, when the matter is settled, they decide to retreat and return to the city. Outside the city, towering walls embrace the fortress, and beneath them emerges a dungeon hidden right inside the city. A message arrives, preparation is complete. The entire squad return to the castle immediately. Due to lack of time, they hesitate over the monster's loot, but still decide to sell it quickly. Kenan kneels before the merchant and lays out all the collected items for inspection. The shopkeeper offers only 1 silver coin, insists the goods are almost worthless, and the woman, gritting her teeth, still agrees. Soon a carriage departs from the city heading to Aura's, the hero's resting place. At the castle, the party is warned. In the grave of the legendary hero, the sword is still intact and remains in the ground. During the carriage ride, they learn, only a true hero can pull out the sword and inherit its power. Arriving at the fortress, Luke contemplates what this power might mean. Soon the group is shown a sealed message from the trading company. The mission involves escorting the cargo to a distant forest village. In a quiet corner of the hall, they keep their voices at a whisper, discussing the escort request to avoid attracting attention. They calculate the risk of leaks, understanding that thieves might target them if details spread. Each member voices their opinion, weighing the reward against the long journey and unknown, dangerous threats. Encouraged by others, Rook suddenly remembers that he is now part of this squad. Though confused, he still accepts these feelings, both awkwardness and genuine, truly pleasant satisfaction. Rook joins the caravan at the mountain pass ready for his first full escort mission with the group. A reminder about pace and conserving strength leads him to the thought, constant support matters more than excitement. The route to the eastern forest settlement is confirmed. Armed, warnings about increasing danger only add weight to the mission, but the merchant feels relief knowing Rook and his healing are nearby. With risks under control and profits protected, the party cautiously advances along the road. The merchant's daughter talks about increased rewards, and Rook quietly notes that it all comes down to profit. The thick dew of the trees presses on the road, and as the caravan moves forward, its anxiety grows. Movement flickers in the shadows, and immediately one must be alert. A coordinated pack of forest wolves surrounds the wagons, taking the horses in their sights. Rock responded with swift bright magic, cutting through the formation before the ambush closed in tightly. An explosive counterattack scatters the wolves, and the pack is forced to retreat from the wagon. Then blades and arrows continue forward, cutting and striking the remaining beasts before they can regroup. Silence falls again on the road. Bodies lie motionless while the team sees that their coordination has become significantly better. Light wounds become noticeable only after the danger has passed. They draw attention to hidden injuries. Ruck quietly applies healing magic, restores his companion, and reminds everyone how quickly his importance grows. Ruck reflects on how expensive church treatment is in Tesla and realizes, ordinary people do not go there unless they are utterly desperate. The group collects magical stones and takes the necessary parts, leaving the rest of the wolf pack's corpses behind to make carrying easier. Water magic is used to wash away blood and demonstrate its practical value not only in battle. That, he contemplates how such clean water supply can support daily life and even bring income. Their journey continues until abandoned ruins resembling a deserted place emerge ahead. The caravan stops inside ancient stone ruins, believing these walls will protect more reliably than the open forest thicket. Examining these structures suggests, once a lost civilization thrived there, possessing advanced knowledge. By the campfire, rumors about increasing monster activity sow anxiety throughout the squad. Group repeated wolf attacks emphasizing that something unusual is happening in the region, and it worries people. Night deepens over the camp, and Ruka is awakened to take the watch. Morning comes quietly among the ruins, and warm tea is shared by the dying fire. Wrapped in blankets, not tents, the team remains ready to move at any moment. Moonlight still lingers in Ruka's thoughts, leaving him focused and pondering his place in this world. The world, he studies the bright night sky, feeling a quiet meaning in the unfamiliar stars. At dawn, they set out on the road again, repelling another wolf attack and finally reaching the forest village. After arriving in the village, the caravan unloads goods at the overnight spot, and the guards part ways with the merchant. The team heads to the local guild to report on the completed task and recent attacks. Inside, they explain the strange number of encounters with wolves on the road. The road, but concern grows because the village is still unprepared, although the danger only increases. After submitting the report, they prepare plans to notify higher authorities and continue the investigation. The conversation returns again to the ancient belief that fairies protect the village, and this might explain why there are no walls here. Some villagers believe that monsters will never come because of this legend. But Rock quietly doubts the story and thinks true safety cannot rely solely on rumors. When the report was ready, the team agreed to rest and discuss future plans the next day. When dusk falls, they choose a well-deserved rest, remaining practical despite the optimism in the village. The next day, Rock walks through the mountain village, noticing the wide streets and sturdy houses. Curious, he buys a snack and looks closely. How quiet and peaceful life goes on when there are no constant threats from monsters. This prompts him to inquire about the local legend of fairies who supposedly guard this area. The old man tells a story about a hidden garden where fairies might once appear. He explains the place in strict rules, warning that visitors must respect the flowers and the stone pillar. After the northern path over the hill, Rook heads to where the elder pointed. Before him stretched an endless field of flowers framed by mountains and forest. In the very heart of the garden stands a lonely stone pillar marking its center. Rivers and fields surround these lands, only this hill blooms with dense color. Noticing the distinct flowers lining the pillar, he felt an unnatural presence there, lingering and not fading. Rook carefully steps into the flower field, moving quietly so as not to damage the plants while approaching the stone pillar. Slowly advancing, he reaches the center and confirms. On the way he disturbed almost nothing. Today up close, the marble column looks ancient, covered with moss and faint carvings. When his hand touches this surface, a sudden reaction occurs and a hidden entrance of the fairies opens. The young healer studies the worn stone pillar, covered in strange carvings. Alone in a forest clearing, he suspects the monument may be connected to him and possibly lead to another world. Approaching closer, he examines the surface, notices a vanished aura and assumes it serves as a passage. His ability to judge fails, he cannot read the symbols, so he remains uncertain. Finally, he touches the stone and releases cleansing magic light bursts upward and awakens the gate. Noticing that the pillar shines too brightly, the healer panics, certain he has overdone the cleansing. The spiral light twists upward, weaving a magical circle that spreads across the sky, while he watches in shock. Shards of radiance scatter outward, and a small silhouette begins to form in the very burst of light. And then a fairy appears, lightly hovering in the air, introducing herself as Lisa Lott and declaring she intends to stay close to him. Stunned for a moment, he hesitantly accepts, feeling that his path has already changed. The fairy excitedly calls him, hovering nearby, repeating the strange nickname again and again. Suddenly she announces that her time is running out and that she needs to return. The wonder stops his thoughts even before he can react. Light envelops her delicate figure and she melts away, leaving him alone in the flower field. The realization strikes him as soon as he concludes that he has learned the summoning spell. Later he tries again and again to activate it, but in vain. Nothing responds and his frustration only grows. Lying in bed, the healer recalls the fairy's farewell and decides to postpone further attempts until he understands the spell better. The next day he goes to the guild looking for work while the escort duties are still pending. At a table in the tavern, travelers talk about monsters that bring trouble and about dangerous roads near the region. Quietly listening, he thinks that gathering herbs is a simple task compared to the unrest. When his companions return, they agree to take on a monster hunting order despite all the risks. After deciding to hunt monsters, the team confirms that the threat is near the village and prepares to depart. After a 2-hour march deep into the forest, they quickly find the prey and immediately move into battle. Although there are only 3 of them, they act in concert and defeat the creatures without much difficulty. For 2 more days they continue the hunt, knocking out generous rewards while he checks his knife against paralysis on the front line. When he returned, his comrades greeted him for receiving the blessing of the goddess. Sitting in the tavern, he declares his intention to return to Langford. Despite the tension not yet easing, he insists, just a little more and that's it, and asks them to endure. Soon the guild receives a bunch of urgent escort requests due to a massive shortage of herbs. After the monster hunt, the company decides to take one of the escort jobs. During the forest journey, their elderly client turns out to be too demanding, forcing them to pass a step-by-step inspection. While they gather herbs, the elderly client sharply scolds the company, and one of the companions almost quits everything. Irritation rises when she hits her for pulling out plants incorrectly. Striving to improve, the healer carefully inquires about the correct gathering methods. She explains which herbs can be picked completely and which must be partially left to regrow. So working side by side, they find common ground when she reveals herbs cannot be grown artificially and one must rely on nature. Again in the tavern, exhaustion covers the whole company. Despite complaints, they admit the work succeeded and the healer's advice really made a difference. Instead of irritation, they feel gratitude. They thank him for handling the difficult client and keeping the request within the necessary limits. The guild confirms the herbs arrived earlier than expected and they are preparing to depart the next day. Later he realized the large-scale herb shortage began back then because of his own previous actions. After fending off a pack of wolves on the road, the party returns to Langford. They agree to rest for 2 days. After a long journey, they wait to finally relax at home. Pleased with their success, the healer quietly feels that something is missing. On his day off, he goes to the workshop to service the spear, while his companions stay somewhere else. The tailor notices minor blade damage and begins repairs, assuring it won't take long. While his spear is being fixed, the master asks about his companions. The man says that one talent is not enough for success, implying that something important is still missing. Turning the question to him, the master advises choosing one's own path, rather than drifting aimlessly. So leaving the shop, he rethinks those words and suddenly realizes he still has not understood the world. Soon rising monster attacks and forcibly pushes the team back into battle. After another successful hunt, the squad celebrates and then receives their rewards. Late that night, he lies in bed and cannot fall asleep. A vague unease gnaws at him more and more, for which he finds no explanation. Before dawn, Terminal knocks on the door, wake him from sleep. He sits up abruptly, feeling that new trouble has come. Two travelers stand guard on a cold stone tower. One takes the task seriously, hoping it will bring a promotion. The other suppresses doubt. Why endure such service every day? Smoke rises beyond the forest, and he spots a huge pack of monsters approaching. Silence changes instantly. This is already an emergency. Quickly orienting himself, the guard focusedly rings the alarm bell. Its heavy toll spreads throughout the region, warning of imminent danger. Here in the guild hall, adventurers gather at the call. The clatter of armor spreads as they prepare for battle. Well-experienced members clarify the warning as tension fills the room and marks the beginning of their first real crisis. The young traveler listens, and as soon as the bells begin to sound clearly, the second signal warns not only the gates are under threat but the entire city. In the guild, the senior member orders everyone to be silent. He reminds, during such crises, every adventurer must gather and prepare. The guild lord quickly introduces himself and reports confirmed activity of a huge monstrous crowd near the northwestern fortress. The map tracks their path. They are heading towards the city. There is very little time left. Evacuation is already impossible. The explanation breaks off on a grim truth. Thousands and thousands of monsters are rushing like an avalanche straight at them. The guildmaster announces, the defense of the western gates will bring rewards and recognition. If successful, you will earn merit, bonuses, and even honor from the lord. He warns, if the gate falls, monsters will flood the city. Volunteers are ordered to depart there immediately. The young traveler understands, these words leave no room for retreat. The crisis threatens the city's survival, and hesitation could cost lives. The crowd around him splits. Some ignite with determination, while others fear the danger and doubt whether it is worth staying. Eventually, his party decides to move out. With weapons ready, they prepare to defend the western gate. While preparations continue, one of the members notices that Mel is missing. They decide her father is keeping her at home as the situation worsens. From above the gate, orders ring out. The monsters will come in waves, and everyone must be on alert even after the first clash. Defensive roles are assigned instantly. Mages raise walls, melee fighters close ranks into barricades, and archers take positions on the walls. The party exchanges a brief encouragement before dispersing to their positions. Each takes the risk without any hesitation. When they act confidently, doubt recedes a little, fear still holds, but hope already balances their zeal. The earth trembles and smoke rises beyond the forest. What once seemed distant now looms and presses. Stone walls are hastily erected, but doubt is already sown among the defenders. The sheer scale of the approaching army makes any defense look fragile. Above the gate, the clinking of the command ring is heard. The first wave, hundreds of forest wolves, is almost catching up to them, and everyone is ordered to retreat inside before the doors are locked. When the enemy rushes forward, a signal is given. Arrows and magic fly toward the advancing monsters. Mages and fighters begin to chant spell and prepare their skills. Light, fire, wind, and water gather as they get ready to strike. Beyond to the walls, the first wave of forest wolves rushes forward. Fear spreads among the defenders as the beasts approach ever closer. The pack reaches the gate's claws scratch the stone. From above, the command finally sounds, attack. A rain of arrows falls synchronously as spells are cast. Fireballs, wind blades, and streams of water strike the approaching hound. Explosions erupt across the field, scattering the wolves and raising dust. Some fall, but others still rush toward the city. Explosions tear apart the stables. Wolves, during reloading arrows and spells, strike relentlessly. Bodies fall, but the defenders hold the merciless onslaught. The veil of smoke disperses and the first wave, almost completely destroyed, becomes visible. At the command, the attack ceases, and as the battlefield quiets down, it becomes completely silent. Relief spreads along the walls for a moment. Orders follow immediately. Restore strength, replenish arrows, and reinforce barricades as new enemies keep approaching them. Against the backdrop of tension, party members check each other. Though shaken, they confirm that they can still stand. Races divide without hesitation. Even exhausted, they prepare for the next assault. When the young healer chews dried meat, he asks, does the Baron really understand the crisis? Yet he keeps himself together and decides to endure. Nearby guild members argue because supplies are dwindling. Some insist resources should go to support North Gate, while others insist on the promise to defend West. Tension rises when the issue of payment and duty comes to the surface. The Lord expects protection, and the guild cannot easily refuse his request. Then calmer voices explain that travelers are free to choose, although the master insisted, unity needs more funding. The shortage of crates shows it is a reminder that the western gates cannot be abandoned. The discussion heats up and becomes bitter when some realize a shortage of supplies could doom West Gate to failure. yet the information must still reach the Lord. The guildmaster is urgently summoned. Questions arise: does the Baron understand the consequences if the gates are destroyed? Exhausted travelers complain of hunger, empty mana, and the rapid melting of arrows. Irritation rolls through the crowd. They are told that additional materials were requested, but approval never came. Stinginess is accused again and again. Those words echo off the walls. Eventually, it becomes clear. Defenders are valued only for holding the city, while support from above remains uncertain. Quietly eating, the young healer watched the others out of the corner of his eye. Some complained about supplies and quantity, but still remained ready for any emergencies. Rumors spread that a second wave is approaching. Watching the old adventurers, he begins to understand their caution in constant danger. When tension rises again, he hands the front line over to his comrades and retreats to focus on support. Responsibility smoothly passes between them. Smoke hangs over the battlefield. Despite the terrible scene, he gathers his thoughts, becoming calmer and ready for what comes next. A herd of horned sheep rushes toward the town, almost 300 heads, hooves thunder on the ground as guards press along the walls. The commander gives the signal and a full assault begins. Magic bursts from the walls. Wind, water, and fire strike the front line, scattering several beasts aside, yet the herd still pushes forward. The young mage releases a light spell. It pierces one half-charged sheep, but the wave closes ranks and presses onward. Repeated strikes split the stone wall. The barrier shudders under their weight. Combined spells together unleash rain. Explosions finally stop the advance. After the battle, the young mage lies on the ground, exhausted but conscious. The commander praises the defenders and orders the attackers to retreat and begin restoration, while the escartori strawberries start repairing the damaged walls. The girl rushes up to him and checks his condition. Sweat streams down his face as she extends the potion to restore his strength. Instead of sitting at home, she admits that she secretly slipped out to help. He looks at her with surprise and anxiety. She explains that the supplies were donated, and she brought extra food from home to support everyone. A potion brewed from rare herbs is given to him. Thanking, he takes it and regains part of his strength. Power returns slowly. The young mage swallows the potion and thanks those who prepared it. While supplies are distributed to the defenders, his body gradually revives. While the stone wall is being reinforced, a chill suddenly runs down his spine. The report confirms the arrival of a B-rank monster, a huge boar of gigantic size. Shock rolls through the gates as the third wave begins. The commander immediately gives orders to call for reinforcements and raise the walls higher. There, seeing that a strong adventurer could not be found, the commander decides to first weaken the beast with arrows and magic before risking the final plan. The great boar wildly rushes across the field to the gates. From somewhere above, the commander orders everyone, aim and strike before it reaches the walls. The giant creature approaches, towering over the landscape, more than 4 meters tall. Its fangs gleam as it lowers its head and charges. Riflemen and mages launch a coordinated strike. Arrows and spells rain down from the sky together. After the smoke clears, it is visible. The boar is still moving, wounded but raging madly. It crashes into the gates with incredible force. Wooden splinters and beams fly apart, and the giant storm breaks through the entrance, roaring as debris scatters around. Adventurers quickly gather in the square and converge to surround the monster. Orders spread: attack together and avoid hitting allies. Shields tear forward as the front line blocks its charge. Blades and arrows cannot pierce the thick hide, but they still try with all their might to hold its advance. The fighters realize magic cannot be safely used at close range. When the formation begins to falter, panic and confusion grow. Suddenly, Mel rushes into the fray and strikes. The hit sends shockwaves down the street as the boar fiercely retaliates. The great boar lowers its head and prepares for another charge. The soldiers tighten their shields as panic spreads down the street. An AC rank adventurer steps forward alone, raises his shield, and declares he will handle this. Others hesitate but step aside, giving him space. The beast bursts inside with devastating force. Its tusks slam into the shield, shaking the ground and pushing it back. Hard despite the impact, he holds his position. The assault slows down, then completely stops against his resistance. With the last effort, he pulls the boar away and hurls it so that it loses balance. For a moment, the invincible monster retreats. The adventurers surrounded the great boar and attacked from every side, trying to bind its movement. Yet the beast holds firm, almost impervious to their attacks. The commander realizes a prolonged slaughter will first drain their side's strength. Since no clear strategy is proposed, the situation is heading towards collapse. The young mage understands he cannot defeat the beast directly, yet he still believes if given a chance he can exhaust it. Realizing that everything is at stake, he reaches a height and prepares his last option. He leaps onto the boar, grips the paralyzing dagger and drives it down, stubbornly determined to slow the monster at any cost. The young mage holds onto the back of the great boar as it wildly jerks and twists in frantic bursts. The warriors shout for him to retreat. In rage, the monster crashes through the ruined structures and tries to throw him off. Despite all this chaos, he holds on tight and feels the weapon begin to work. Gathering his remaining strength, he drives the paralyzing dagger deeper. A flash runs through the beast's body, and its movements finally start to falter. The giant boar breaks through the western gates, hurling debris across the street. A flash of light hits it as Luca is thrown aside by the force that lifts him off the ground. And the villagers surround the monster while Luca regains his balance. The animal falls, its body stiffens from paralysis, but it is still alive. The warriors enter and slit its throat. The danger disappears. Soon the tower signals that the crowd has stopped. It stopped and relief spreads because they confirm there are no human casualties. While he looks at the consequences, Luke realizes, by defending the city, he himself has opened the path of a traveler. Luke stands among his companions as the celebration finally begins. Around him smiles and praise, but he quietly realizes the discomfort he stubbornly rejected. The table is cramped, crowded. The townspeople pull him into their joy. He laughs with them but understands. He pretended not to notice his own unease. The days drag on. He cleans up debris near the gates and wanders the road, hunting stray monsters. Later, the guild announces a reward, 30 gold coins for each participant. During the meeting, the Baron declares that he will pay for the repairs, but rumors suddenly shift the blame to humanoid monsters. The guildmaster confirms the payment and Lucas understands. It's time to move on. After the council, Lucas listens as his companions discuss the tension between the Baron and the guild. The excitement of battle has faded, replaced by quieter thoughts. They decide to return their equipment and celebrate properly with a hearty feast. Plans are made to gather again as soon as everything is settled. In the tavern, the table is laden with food and drinks. Laughter washes away the fatigue of recent days as they savor the reward together. The conversation turns to how each will spend their share, on upgrades, new gear, and future preparations, all reflecting their ambitions. When asked about his choice, Luke tightens his cup and freezes, weighing a decision that could change his path. Luke dares and asks his comrades about their future as travelers. This question changes the mood at the table and everyone in the group meets it with serious faces. He explains that he wants to understand their long-term goals. Curiosity pushes aside the celebration as they ponder his words. One participant talks about how to rise in ranks and become strong enough to protect the city from another disaster. Growth and preparation come to the forefront. Luke says that training in a small town cell can give faster progress, and the very idea hints at the possibility of leaving. After some thought, the others decide to stay because they believe they can continue to improve and not leave their home. Luke finally says what he really wants. He declares that he dreams of visiting ruins, distant towns, and lands beyond their borders. Exploration, not comfort, occupies all his thoughts. With a steady gaze, he admits he wants to see more of the world and test himself with harder challenges. The confession silences the table. His companions admit they had no idea it would happen exactly like this, but from the very beginning they felt his restless determination. One of them explains some seek stability while others chase higher peaks. Luca clearly belongs to those who strive for more. And although sadness still lingers, they encourage him to keep this baton, to accept that their roads will soon part. Glasses jumped high as the group announced a celebration for the rescue after the crush and marked Luca's departure. Foam overflows and laughter fills the tavern. Food and drinks are shared endlessly. Luke smiles at his friends. He knows they are his first companions in this world, and they will remain important to him forever. His thoughts, when the night thickens, again pull him toward the desire to travel distant lands. Others silently ponder his decision. Then one of the companions recalls the fight with the great boar, feeling his own fear at that moment. He admits that Luke rushed forward with courage, and it was etched in everyone's memory for a long time. One of the companions imagines how Luke will become a traveler. He will come across ancient ruins, find lost artifacts, and gain a name through explorations. Meanwhile, another contemplates his own doubts and admits he became a traveler to escape responsibility, not to chase greatness. Regret surfaces when he thinks again about the conversation with his father Rand. He does not know whether he will continue speaking or ultimately give up halfway. Morning commenced, the group gathers near the carriage prepared for departure. Farewells sound through firm handshakes and steady voices. Encouragement catches up with Luke as he takes a step forward. He is reminded that if necessary he can turn back, yet he resolutely continues on his chosen path. Before leaving, the comrade teases Luke and gives a final warning. The horse-drawn carriage waits by the gate, and the heavy meaning of farewell falls on everyone. He raises his hand with a bright smile, choosing to move forward, even though the separation hurts him. Friends silently watch him, understanding that they may never meet again. In the carriage, an elderly woman asks where he is going. Luke replies that he is still deciding where to head next. Having looked through several possible towns and villages, he finds nothing truly convincing. Uncertainty still lingers as he studies the map. One single name awakens his heart, and he declares that Elam will be his last wandering destination. A lonely carriage rolls towards Elam, the labyrinth city, while Luke begins his journey into unknown lands and trials await him. A fairy appears before the healer and reports that many people have entered the fairy garden. The unexpected news instantly captures his attention. She explains they examined the pillar and caused an uproar. Realizing that its cleansing might be connected, he begins to get nervous. Later she adds, the attackers lost consciousness and woke up on a flower. Relief flashes across his face, but he hopes that his involvement will never be revealed. Sitting on the bed, he promises to call her again tomorrow. The fairy prepares to leave, her time is running out. While he is alone, he quietly reflects, anticipating their next meeting. On the 5th day of the journey, the carriage is still rolling towards Dungeon Town, Elm. Along the way, they pass several small villages and camps for overnight rest. In the cramped, crowded wagon, 2 experienced travelers ride as guards. The space compresses so much that it becomes unbearably uncomfortable. The rough roads shake him so much that his whole body twitches, draining his strength. They stop only on the 2nd day. The pain subsides and he cannot get up. By evening, they reach the transit city earlier than expected. The tension disappears from his face with relief. The thought of a normal rest finally warms him. At first, walking the safe streets, he realizes the journey here is much easier than he initially imagined. And already after arriving in the city, he notices many shops stretching along the streets. Since there are few inns and they are not included in the carriage fare, he decides to find a place to spend the night. In a modest tavern, he secures a room for himself on the 2nd floor. The price is steep, but he agrees and plans a short walk afterward. Walking outside, he looks at the buildings and again estimates the price. But despite this, he chooses simply to enjoy the atmosphere without unnecessary purchases. Curiosity leads him to a street food stall where he buys unfamiliar fruits and simple meat. Having tasted the food, he notes its sharp flavor but accepts it as part of the journey. Travel, 2 women with beastly ears approach him and try to drag him inside with bribing offers. Embarrassed and broke, he refuses and quickly walks away, muttering to himself that during travel he cannot waste coins. Just now, the hanging sign catches his eye. He notices the bookstore in the transit town. With surprise, curiosity drives him to the entrance. Inside the shelves, packed with books, they greet him. He runs his eyes over the titles on plants and heroes, amazed that such valuable things are displayed just like that. While he was browsing through everything, in a row, historical books about the kingdom caught his attention and he suddenly realized how much more he still needed to learn. Then his attention is grabbed by a magical grimoire and a sudden excitement flares in his chest. While he was examining the shelf, something ominous suddenly emanated from the grimoire. His skill of assessment triggered sharply and he understood this was a fully magical book, not an ordinary one. He stubbornly carries the book to the checkout and asks to buy it. The seller warns, returns are not possible. Despite the warning and the high price, he insists. Let 4 gold coins leave his hands while he forcefully pulls a confident smile. As soon as he steps outside the threshold, regret immediately catches up. But despite this, curiosity about the grimoire is stronger than his irritation. Returning to his room corner, he studies the book and realizes that it contains several sacred artifacts, which deepens his understanding of rare magic. Sitting on the bed, he reads the grimoire and understands. It describes a spell that creates holy stones from ordinary earth. Interesting, he prepares to test it. Raising his hand, he solemnly utters the spell and releases magic in his room. Energy gathers before him as the spell takes effect. The lights whirl wildly, forcing him to close his eyes and grasp for protection. The power compresses into a small glowing object. When the glow fades, 1 stone remains on the floor. He picks it up and feels holy power inside. Excitement grows as he realizes this stone may be much more valuable than he thought. Standing in his room, he raises his hand and calls again, trying to summon the fairy once more. Magical circles whirl and flutter in the air above his palm. Light gathers, spirals tighten, and a small glow settles in his hand before suddenly bursting outward. In the radiant glow before him appears a fairy with bright wings spread wide. She hovers outside as if the previous moment never happened. At first he is nervous, but quickly composes himself and greets her. The familiar presence eases the tension in his shoulders. Then she begins to tell about the blue flower that bloomed in the garden and about the yellow insect that draws her to it, and with this brings new anxieties to the discussion. When the conversation comes to an end, the fairy prepares to return to her garden. He watches as she disappears and promises to call her again. Since he is left alone, he asks himself, why is the spell that consumes so much magic needed only to talk to her? Doubt does not leave his thoughts. He lies down on the bed and leaning back admits, the summoning takes almost all his strength, so it is disadvantageous. He decides not to rely on it too often. Newton temptation wins in the end, and he continues to call her every day despite his own previous decision. That controls the expenses. Every morning he creates holy stones, and in the evening, restoring his strength, he trains. Inside the carriage and later in the inn yard, he feels the weight of loneliness. Constant challenges become his way to drive away quiet nights. Memories of comrades from this world and from his former life surface in his mind. Faces from dawn and faces from recent travels still hold in memory. During breaks, he listens as veteran adventurers discuss the 14-story Elm Dungeon. Their stories step by step shape his growing ambitions. Tales of conquered dungeons and battles won at the cost of hard fights ignite excitement in him. Each retelling fuels his desire to challenge himself. But the memory of his struggle with the great forces of the wild boar forces him to face his own weakness. Determination and doubt stand side by side in his heart. He stands at the edge of the cliff, gazes into the distant mountains, and admits his current strength is not enough to catch up with great dreams. Turning back to the carriage, he clenches the stick and steals courage for himself. The far-sighted elm briefly reminds him he needs to become stronger. Soon, the gigantic gates of Dungeon Town come into view. Behind them, a 40-story dungeon and dangers he has never encountered before. Just having arrived, he parts with the guards and thanks them for their help. Relief intertwines with impatience as he steps forward alone. He walks briskly through the lively streets and carefully examines his new bass guitar. Elm greets him warmly. At Elmi, he notices the thought of visiting the guild, but decides to find food first and only then explore the city. In a modest tavern, a waitress brings meat, skewers, and soup to a lonely traveler, noting that he apparently was not planning to go to Elm. While he eats, he is drawn to think about how the city looks different this time, not like the one that was before him, and he recalls the strange pillar that recently appeared in all these events. Interest sparks when she recognizes the name Langford. He explains that it is far in the east, about 20 days by horseback stagecoach. One more client calls for attention, forces her to tear herself away from the table and return to work. Alone again, the traveler contemplates the lack of maps, the presence of monsters, and the dangers lurking beyond the city limits. The traveler takes a sip of the expensive liqueur he ordered to show confidence and stops contentedly at its sharp taste. Further nearby, a few travelers are marking their earnings while he quietly eats, thinking about the valuable meat soup at the tavern and about his expenses. Having tried the dish, he feels satisfaction and begins to perceive the small town as a convenient stop. Conversations about the dungeon floors and absent allies echo in the room, hinting at dangers that still persist. Rumors about strange troubles in the west reach him and leave his thoughts heavy as he finishes his meal. After finishing his drink, the traveler decides it is time to leave the tavern. Having gotten used to this mood, he prepares for the next step of his journey. Outside, he walks along the road and recalls the directions given to him, turning exactly at the right corner just as he was instructed. With the waitress's hint, he finds a modest inn, goes inside, and hopes to find a place at an affordable price. In his room, he throws himself onto the bed and exhales deeply, yet remains alert. Thieves might be nearby in an unfamiliar town. Exhaustion overwhelms him and he decides to rest, seeking some relief before sleep. Deep in his room, the traveler freezes and listens. Lizu, as if casually, says she rested at the very top of the city gate, and her strange explanation confuses him. She describes the gentle glow of the place, flowers, splashes of water, but he struggles to understand exactly what she means. Remembering that the next day he will go to the dungeon, he realizes making the holy stones might become difficult. Soon, Lee says it is time for her to return. Before leaving, she waves cheerfully and warns that it is raining outside. When she disappears, he notices the rain and quietly prepares for the trials tomorrow. While the traveler steps outside, the rain falls steadily, and he thinks about Lisa's connection with the spirits and wonders if these beings really exist. He decides to visit the guild, goes to the innkeeper and asks how to get there, and before leaving, he attentively memorizes every clue. Step by step, making his way through the narrow streets of Elma, he realizes the city is bigger and more confusing than he expected. Following the clue, he goes to where there should be a dead end, but uncertainty begins to grow. Instead of the usual turn, his path is blocked by a huge wall, and he stands staring at it while the rain pours. The rain pours as the traveler examines the towering wall ahead, and does not understand why it blocks the way, although he was sure he was heading toward the city center. Thinking it over, he admits this structure might be part of the inner fortress, not the outer boundary. Approaching closer, he notices a gap in the wall and sees, under the downpour, stand figures keeping guard. The guard gate and a similar structure on the other side hint at an important object hidden inside. At the entrance bay, ahead rise large buildings, but a faint unease does not leave him as he tries to find out if something bad has happened. In the rain, the traveler recognizes ahead a large structure, the guild building, a familiar sight and some relief. Inside, the travelers gather around the quest board despite the weather, and he enters through the entrance and walks forward with quiet concentration. At the counter, he asks about registration in this city and learns that if needed, he can complete it immediately. Having received instructions and a form, he prepares to finish the process and go upstairs. Walking down the corridor, he feels a strange familiarity as if the plan here repeats the one he once saw in another guild. In a quiet room lined with shelves, the traveler meets an elderly administrator and explains that he recently moved to Elm. Home, the gentle woman greets him kindly, without hesitation opens access to the records and library. He rummages through the shelves and finds a volume describing the dungeons of Elm, noting that this collection is similar to those in other cities. Sitting at the table, he studies the contents and learns, All 40 floors have been cleared, bosses sorted by rank and monsters classified. The map and familiar creature names only deepen his suspicion. This dungeon is woven according to the same principle as the game levels he once knew. Sitting at the table, the traveler sighs heavily and begins manually copying the dungeon map. Slowly, awkwardly, but persistent Lido survive. As he studies the symbols, it dawns on him. These marks indicate external stairs and hidden passages, so the dungeon's possibilities double. Careful analysis shows 3 tiers of walls, doors on the outside, and stairs built along the external structure. Standing before the huge inner gates, he concludes that the dungeon is hidden behind these fortified walls. Finally, he understood the truth. The walls protect the city from monsters in case they ever break out of the dungeon. In Fortress Hall inside, travelers gather before the heavy doors leading to the dungeon entrance. The traveler inspects the equipment and feels. Many of them are already operating on a completely different level. A well-armed band passes by. It draws his attention, especially a reserved elf carrying a large bow-type projectile weapon. So for a moment their eyes meet. He suddenly lets go, and she calmly looks away. He watches as that powerful group pays the fee and enters, realizing that they are far ahead of everyone else. Shaking off distractions, he pays for his entry and heads to the stairs, focusing on today's goal. In a stone cell, the traveler stands before a tall transfer monolith and recognizes it as a device that allows moving between dungeon floors. He presses his palm to the surface and feels a faint connection as the system recognizes him. Having finished preparations, he steps into the corridor with a clear purpose: to reach the monolith on the 6th dungeon floor and return safely. Excitement builds as he enters the observation area and is eager to test the dungeon's teleportation system firsthand. In a narrow stone corridor, a young healer checks the map and decides that the dungeon here is simple. On this floor, the only threat is slugs, but something barely noticeable is felt ahead and he freezes. From the side passage, he observes the family fighting the slime together. Their clash confirms this level is suitable for beginners. Noticing the entrance to the 2nd floor, he decides that staying here is unnecessary and shifts his gaze upward. On the stairs near the landing, he looks around for danger, finds nothing, and carefully ascends. On the 2nd floor, he straightens up, firmly stands on his feet, and prepares for the next challenge. A horned rabbit is driven down the corridor by a family hungry for food. The healer sits aside and watches as they corner it and kill it without hesitation. He understands their need but remains indifferent. Having gathered the meat, the group goes even deeper with steady fighting spirit. He quietly stays nearby and decides to advance further ahead. Climbing to higher floors, he notices anyone can hunt here and earn both from magical stones and meat. It becomes clear how much this dungeon has already developed. On the 5th floor, fallen goblins give better rewards and increased training value. Reaching the 6th floor, he feels the difficulty rising and prepares himself. In front of a tall pillar, the healer imagines the 1st floor and presses his palm to the surface. The landscape changes instantly. Stone walls rearrange, confirming he has teleported to another place inside the dungeon. On a long stairwell, he recognizes the structure and realizes he has truly returned to the 1st floor. There ahead stand the exit guards. Understanding spreads across his face as he grabs. He can repeat this retelling as many times as he wants. Yet after trying it several times, he cuts a quick run up 5 floors, immediately attracting the attention of nearby adventurers. While there is still time before lunch, the healer considers whether to repeat the 5-floor run or go to the guild for new maps. After brief reflection, he chooses efficiency. At the guild, he copies the maps of the next floor and quickly eats an early snack to return to the dungeon as soon as possible. On the 6th floor, he prepares again to hunt forest wolvest main monsters roaming around. The wolf bursts from the corridor, but he reacts calmly. The spear hits precisely, the tip pierces the body and knocks the beast to the ground. Although his bag fills with fur, he accepts the mess and continues forward to clear the floor. Without a planned strategy, he ascends to the 7th floor and notices that the enemies are getting stronger. Sticking to the laid-out route, he counts every turn as he moves on. The copied map shows a complex layout. Corridors branch again and again, and each section looks almost the same. Relying on marked squares, he checks his position to avoid losing his way. Tracking becomes crucial. Although he studied the map in advance, walking in the labyrinth proves difficult. When he occasionally notices other squads, it somewhat calms him. A forest wolf and a kobold blocked the path. They understood the danger, fighting 2 at once. He struck first to quickly secure victory. Finally, the kobold strikes first, but he suddenly turns and drives the spear through the body. Blood splashes, the creature falls, and the corridor falls silent. Door after the clash, a dim light gathers around him. Counting his progress, he realizes this is the 10th blessing and confirms that both enemies are defeated. Running his fingers over the symbols on the wall, he finds the right path and carefully slips into the darker passage. As he walks, thoughts arise in his mind about how the wolves and kobolds coordinated their attacks, as if on this floor they share the same hostility. Either he freezes, hearing the treachery of traps, or the rumble of the ceiling about to collapse. He moves steadily, with only the choice of the next safe direction in his mind. Reaching the 11th floor, he sinks to the ground with relief. On the previous levels, everything seemed simple, but the deeper floors became more demanding. Gathering the frozen fur together, he decides to leave the dungeon and rest before pushing himself further again. Returning to the city, he heads to the guild. There they exchange magical stones, while other goods are sold near the entrance. At the counter, he extends the cleaned fur. The merchant carefully examines it and agrees on a fair payment. When the business is done, he rents a room and falls asleep, recalling the brutal fights. Metals, having gathered information up to the 12th floor and sold his magical stones, he sets off back to the dungeon entrance. He returns to the 11th floor. He believes this place better suits his current abilities and decides to proceed calmly. Instead of rushing further, he advances step by step, planning to thoroughly clear each floor. As soon as he entered the spacious hall, he noticed it was amazingly bright here and full of adventurers around. Listening to nearby conversations, he learns the 13th floor is full of orcs, so it becomes clear why so many parties still hold on the upper levels. To avoid losing profit, he reviews notes about the 12th floor, where orcs and desert cows appear. Having just arrived, he moves forward unhurriedly, hoping that other adventurers are nearby so there will be fewer encounters. At first, the corridor seems manageable. Looking at the map, he decides to break through deeper all the way to the 16th floor, feeling that a dangerous creature awaits him ahead. Suddenly, a huge desert cow crashes into the passage and rushes forward. Looking at its size and speed, he prepared for a direct collision. The bovine monster passed through the narrow dungeon corridor, and the young healer met it calmly. His spear struck the creature's head with force, but despite the blow, the monster barely reacted and continued the attack. Dust rose every time it gained speed again. In the tight passage, stabbing the spear straight into the heart was too risky, so he looked for another way out. Light flashed in his hand and turned into a glowing orb. He cast a spell, but the beast suddenly lunged upward. The collision of the body rising met the fall of the one flying down. The explosion flipped the monster before it hit the stone floor hard and froze. When the monster fell and fainted, darkness and dark liquid covered the doctor from head to toe. He looked at his hands stained with blood and realized these were the remains of the creature's brain. A small white mass remained on the floor. He crouched down and carefully looked at it. The object was warm and soft, slightly swollen as if filled with liquid inside. He touched it barely and it burst like a thin milky package. The smell confirmed that it was from a desert cow. Moving further, he passed the 13th and 14th floors almost without resistance. Minor skirmishes slightly slowed him down. As soon as he ran to the next corridor, a new enemy appeared ahead, blocking the way forward. The great orc blocked the corridor, clutching a wooden club. The healer recognized him and prepared a spear. Both kept their distance. Unlike other monsters, the orc watched him closely, not lunging forward. He moved first, took a step, and with a quick lunge struck the torso. The orc responded with brute force. He swung his club and struck forward. Their attacks clashed in a narrow passage. The footage showed the creature relies purely on brute strength. The doctor adjusted his steps and was ready to stop its straightforward assault. The orc club collapsed to the ground, but the healer withstood the blow. His body felt different harder than before, tempered by the battles that had already taken place. Throwing off the grip, he thrust the spear forward with all his might. The strike landed cleanly, cutting through the monster's defense. Since the momentum carried him into the final sweeping strike, the steel cut deep and the orc fell onto the stone floor. After the fight, he noticed a wooden utensil among the ruins. He carefully picked it up, silently examined the strange object. Later, he showed that object to a woman in the city. She recognized it as a spatula, and this left him completely puzzled about its purpose. In the city, he showed the spatula to a shopkeeper. She explained that it was ordinary and often dropped, nothing unusual about it. Although she called it a mundane thing, she still offered to buy it for a few gold coins as if it had some practical value. He felt no rush, so he hesitated. Later, some merchant mentioned upgrade scrolls and how such things can enhance weapons or armor. Hearing this, he decided not to part with the spatula for now. Now, having gotten used to the dungeon floor, he returned to the tavern. The owner noticed that he had become calmer in behavior. He did not rush blindly. He decided not to hurry, to rest, to walk through the city, and to repair his spear before fighting again. In the inn, the owner mentioned a place that can cleanse the soul. The advice caught the healer's attention, but the explanation remained vague. Going outside, he noticed the city was more crowded than he expected. Almost all the buildings looked as if they were prepared for adult adventurers, not beginners. He noticed that many shops had no clear signs, so from the outside, you wouldn't understand what they sold until you entered. The layout seemed inconvenient, yet alive. Considering his priorities, he decided to visit the blacksmith first, instead of wandering somewhere else. Reaching the forge, he raised the iron spear and asked to have it repaired, carefully preparing for his next descent into the dungeon. At the forge, the blacksmith needed to inspect the iron spear, so he offered to sharpen and securely fasten it for a small fee. The healer agreed and stepped back to wait. While the work was ongoing, he examined the workshop. Weapons were laid out along the walls, and inside there was no lack of decor. Everything looked purely practical. The blue metal caught his eye. When he inquired, the blacksmith said, "This is mithril." The master explained that mithril is light but strong, often used for magical tools and weapons. He learned that although mithril itself is not magical, it enhances equipment when combined with elements of magic. Once holding a mithril weapon, the healer asked if it could be enhanced with magic. The blacksmith immediately dismissed the idea and explained, "It is not that simple." He described that proper enhancement requires complex magical processes and the fusion of elements through alchemy. Such work demanded rare mastery in materials. The master admitted that he could not perform such a level of refinement, yet he respected those who were capable of it. As soon as the sharpening was finished, the spear was returned to its owner. The blacksmith told him, "Rely on strength and magic wisely." Before leaving, the healer was reminded, "First learn to properly handle your improved spear." Finally, stepping out of the forge, he pondered the dangers hidden in forging powerful weapons. If you attract too much attention, you will bring trouble, and he felt that magical enhancement held even more to be understood. The equipment was beyond his budget, so he decided to look instead for stronger magical books. In the bookstore, he wandered between tall shelves. The selection seemed more modest than in big cities. Various titles caught his attention, from guides about creatures to magical dictionaries. Many of them turned out to be widely distributed and quite mundane. Peering closely at the spines, he realized stories that were impossible in his former world were considered commonplace here. In the bookstore, he pondered whether to study creation magic to be ready for extraordinary situations. But his gaze shifted to the section about spirit magic. Reaching for the volume that told about its use among elves, he decided to take a closer look at it. When his hand touched the book, another hand intercepted it. An elven girl stood nearby. She stopped his choice and arranged an unexpected meeting among the shelves. In the bookstore near the dungeon, a young healer reached for a book, but the elf nearby noticed his interest and allowed him to take it. However, he froze awkwardly. She decided to take the book and prepared to buy it, quietly showing gratitude. Without warning, she stepped closer between the shelves and simply looked at him. It was as if he was pierced. He froze under her watchful gaze. Tense, he took another item and tried to step away from the situation. She realized there was a misunderstanding and apologized. Having bought the book, she left the shop, leaving him alone with the bitter regret that would not let go. There, squeezing back between the shelves, the healer tried to regain his concentration. He encouraged himself, carefully rummaged, and hoped to find a useful grimoire. Exaltation overwhelmed him as soon as he came across a rare tome titled Holy Wind Grimoire. Clutching luck to his heart, he quickly snatched the book from the shelf. Outside the shop, he examined the book and pondered its contents. The title hinted that the wind was connected with holiness. Walking to the inn, he wondered if a spell could control the air temperature. A sudden rumble near the church caught his gaze. Approaching the building, he noticed many armed figures gathering. The tense atmosphere seemed unnatural, so he began to find out what was happening. In front of the church, the young traveler knelt, placing his sword on the ground, and others were around him. He prayed as if this attempt was meant to decide everything. Clenching the blade with both hands, he activated his strengthening skill. Power surged forward, and the crowd urged him to continue. Sweat dripped as he poured more and more strength into the weapon. Hope flared when the sword began to glow. Suddenly, cracks appeared on the metal. Within seconds, the blade crumbled to dust. The murmur fell silent. Kneeling in the ashes, he realized 5 years of effort had turned into a complete failure. Watching the crowd disperse, the healer understood. The failed ritual was supposed to strengthen the armor. The true picture left him anxious. A priest approached him and questioned him. He explained that he was just passing by and came because of the noise. The priest told how people once sought blessings to strengthen their gear, and how luck over time became rare. Now this practice was considered superstition. Faith grew from stories about a man who repeatedly succeeded in the past. When defeats increased, anger towards the church followed. Due to riots, official blessings and enhancements were banned. Yet some travelers still gathered there, hoping to upgrade their smithing. Standing before the church gate, the healer asked why God allows such practices to exist. Thoughts about the being who sent him to this world resurfaced. Looking up, he had no idea whether that mysterious image was truly divine, what such a God would answer. At the hotel, fatigue caught up with him after a sleepless night. He again reviewed everything he had learned about magical armor and materials. While eating, his thoughts returned to the instructions in the grimoire about recovery from poison and paralysis. Later at the market, hesitation displaced ambition. The memory of defeat made strengthening gear seem too risky. Walking down the street, the healer recalled Mr. Khan's warning about the dangers of armor enhancement. The memory pressed on as he weighed the risks. He connected the story of a man who once received God's blessed grace through enhancement with the ancient church practices. Fragments of information slowly began to form a clear pattern. Still, doubts did not leave him as he collected silver coins and passed by the church. He felt something in this story did not add up completely. Discarding these thoughts, he entered the dungeon and prepared for the 16th floor. In the corridor, the silence seemed darker than on the upper floors, where life was bustling and travelers wandered. On the 16th floor, cold air was pulling through the corridor. The doctor realized monsters rise from here onto people, so most adventurers avoided them. Undead creatures had overrun these levels. Skeletons and ghosts appeared deeper underground. Only a few brave ones dared to descend for profit. Examining the map, he searched for a place near the intersection. The document had a warning: there were traps in the floor and also hidden poisonous needles. He carefully inspected the tiles and noticed areas with uneven brackets. Although they were marked as poisonous, the needles did not look immediately lethal. Recalling the healing magic he once learned, he straightened up and prepared himself. Traps meant danger, but not guaranteed death, so he got ready to move forward. Nailing approached the marked tile and pressed it with his staff. A sharp click echoed in the space. The mechanism stubbornly resisted, but eventually bent and gave way under the force. It struck the needles. A shot burst from below and hit the wall. Although it did not kill them instantly, the size of the projectile was enough to cause serious injuries. Remembering the trap's location, he forced himself to stay alert in battle. The dungeon demanded constant attention. Suddenly, bones rattled in the corridor. A skeleton warrior emerged from the darkness and rushed at him swiftly. He barely dodged the first blow and immediately turned around, looking at him, tightly gripping his weapon. He had to fight on the cold 16th floor. Seeing the skeleton before him, the healer balanced his breath. Although he expected, the undead bare bones still unsettled his equilibrium. He stood up holding a sword in his hand, and the creature moved forward. Its joints moved unnaturally, as if without muscles and flesh. During the clash, he noticed a stone embedded in its chest, but the enemy fought with amazing strength and skill. The blades rose again and again as he parried blows and counterattacked. The skeleton held its weapon more precisely than ordinary monsters. Seizing a moment to break through, he thrust the spear forward. The strike pierced the bones and instantly ended the clash. Finally, his spear shattered part of the bony frame, but the creature still continued to advance. The bone fragments cracked, but its hollow eye sockets remained fixed on him. He realized ordinary strikes were not enough, so he took hold of the magical stone embedded in the chest. Hitting it precisely proved difficult. He suddenly lunged forward. He threw the spear and aimed directly at the glowing core. The spear pierced the ribs and struck the stone. The skeleton collapsed instantly, its body scattered across the floor. The bones clattered sharply against the stone tiles. After the clash, he examined the fragment in his hand, a broken magical stone. In a dim stone corridor, the young healer examines a rusty sword torn from the skeleton. The dull blade and fragile condition make him freeze in indecision. After a brief trial, he lowers the weapon to the ground. He has neither skill nor fencing ability, so he will not rely on such unreliability. Anxiety tightens his chest as darkness stretches ahead. Instead of retreating, he decides to rely on magic. At the end of the corridor, some presence barely stirs. He raises his hand and gathers the light. The glowing sphere rushes forward, and in the radiance, a skeleton charging up appears. The fight begins. A bullet of light hits the skeleton and explodes through its interior. The deadened one collapses instantly, and the fragments scatter down the corridor. Finally, broken clicks and falls to the floor, stops, watches the destruction, and the healer realizes the spell has a powerful destructive force at short range. Confidence evens out his breathing. The magic proved effective. He prepares to advance to the next chamber. Suddenly, another skeleton emerges from the dark room behind him. The silence in the corridor thickens as soon as he raises the blade. Quickly reacting, he sharply throws out his hand and gathers the holy light again resolutely to strike the approaching undead before it can attack. The skeleton stands intact, though the holy light flashed. Its skull tilts as if confused, and the fingers still tightly grip the blade. The second impulse tears his body apart. Bones scatter across the stone floor. The doctor lowers his hand, realizing the first strike failed. It flickers instantly, then freezes. He thinks that unstable magic wastes energy and cannot be relied upon. Anathere, running nosedly, tears to the side, anticipating the attack. He waves the wand to parry, not to cast. The corridor becomes quiet again. He continues walking. It is calm in the dungeon. He stops to rest and conserve strength for what lies ahead. At the crossroads, the healer freezes, comparing left with right. Suspicion suggests traps most likely guard only one path. A sharp metallic sound cuts the silence. Instinct pushes him back. At the same moment, a hidden blade rushes past, barely missing him. While relief has not yet settled, an orc emerges from the shadows and, gripping the sword he recognized earlier, steps forward. Glasses like steel, they clash in strikes, exchanging a barrage. Unlike fragile skeletons, the orc withstands direct attacks, forcing him to fight cautiously. Finally, after an exhausting clash, holy light and determination bring down the orc. Power washes over him like a wave as he realizes the fight has raised his level again. Then, kneeling in the corridor, the healer prepares a cleansing ritual, focusing on expelling the unclean presence ahead. Seemingly an incredibly fast skeleton bursts from above, lands and rushes forward. When it tries to cast, no magic responds to its call. He barely manages to dodge a sudden strike and shudders. Chaos rises inside as he wonders why the spell failed at the most critical moment. When the enemy is already pressing close, he throws his hand forward and forces the cleansing to activate at point-blank range. A flash of light bursts out and tears the skeleton to pieces. As the bones scatter, he comprehends the result. Only now does he understand, the spell works properly only within a certain distance. Among the scattered bones, the healer finds a grimoire that fell from the fallen enemy. He picks it up unsure how it will be useful in battle. He recognizes it as a sacred text of magic he did not have before, and with new interest studies the cover. First, he returns to the room where he once rested. There he intently studies the unfamiliar spell written inside and prepares to test it. And in his palm, a white fire flares against the wall when he lets it go. It smolders silently, not exploding. The smoldering flame does not go out, and expectation is blurred by confusion. It remains, strangely lingering on the stone surface. A white fiery thread drips from his palm and hangs in the air. He watches intently as it slowly slides forward instead of bursting into flames. Pressing his palm to the wall, he watches as the fire clings and crawls across the surface. In a moment, it explodes with a delayed thrust. Lowering the staff, he admits that he still does not understand how to properly control the spell. So for now, he decides to test it on skeletons. Citizens, as if summoned by the very thought, a skeleton emerges from around the corner of the corridor. It calmly accepts this as a worthy target. Holy fire is gathering again in his hand, ready to measure its true impact on the undead. A white fiery wave hangs between them, and the skeleton hesitated instead of stepping forward. Feeling his hesitation, the healer pushes the fire further. He moves forward, not attacking. The skeleton retreats down the corridor, follows it, urging the slow fire to keep pace. In a trap with nowhere left to run, a cold corners itself. From above, it shortens the distance to prevent another sudden dagger strike. A more powerful burst of fire erupts from his hand and covers the skeleton. White flames tightly cling to its bones. Seizing the moment, he activates cleansing at close range. Light streams through the burning frame and the skeleton is reduced to ashes. After the skeleton burns away, another grimoire falls onto the stone floor. He sees that the white flame worked and approaches closer to examine the reward. Before him lies a black-bound folio marked with strange symbols. Suspicion grows as he carefully studies this unfamiliar grimoire spell. In the stone corridor, a young healer unfolds a red-black grimoire titled Fire of Chaos. Uncertainty appears on his face, suddenly realizes he has never studied this volume. Ancient diagrams and dense text cover the pages. Past knowledge resurfaces again, linking chaos with disorder and unstable magical alignment, not mere destruction. Race records recall how quarter devils wield forces that hurl chaos, thereby only strengthening this connection. Speaking of purity of forms, chaos magic draws power from its own realm, opposing holy energy. In the bookshop, the clerk explains, sometimes defective grimoires appear, but they hold no value. The doctor listens as she adds, such books are often sold in bulk or used for firewood. Disappointment settles on him when his copy is sent away the same way. Outside, he stops and reflects. Holy magic is accepted as fact, so chaos magic must also exist, but no reliable information about defective grimoires can be found. Then he eats at the tavern, and thinks that some might have chosen the blood of a quarter devil to control the power of chaos. While he quietly drinks, he is tormented by the thought, are these people acting by their own choice or under the power of invisible control? Stepping out from behind the counter, the healer admits to himself that there is still much incomprehensible in this world. Alone, he studies the grimoire again. The feeling that chaotic fire is a step forward still warms with hope, but he decides instead to focus on training the holy fire. A tavern worker approaches as soon as he asks for another drink. The atmosphere shifts from quiet contemplation to ordinary routine. Food is brought to him, and he agrees to eat while waiting. Nearby laughter spills out because someone joyfully begins their meal. A stranger elf catches his gaze. Surprise flashes between them as their eyes meet across the table. Recognition flickers between them while the healer recalls how she gave her that book. Their conversation turns to the scope of spirit magic. She is interested in his experience. She watches intently as he prepares to respond. Instead of continuing to speak outdoors, she suggests continuing the conversation over a glass. He glances at the grimoire in his hand, feeling its unnatural, strange essence. From everywhere, above and around, the crowded tavern hums. They walk together to the table. Only a flash of surprise crossed his face when he heard this unexpected offer. Later, the usual order is established, and he realizes their meeting may not be just a coincidence. At a round table in the tavern, 3 adventurers notice the arrival of the elf woman. One teases her for being late. The elf responds calmly, treating the younger girl with gentle, familiar warmth. A brief flicker of animation passes over her face as she brushes off worries about age. She explains she met a guy in her shop and gave him a spirit magic text. The man clad in armor carefully examines it with a stern, measured gaze. The tension flares for a moment as a sharper companion mocks the situation. Despite the pressure, the healer does not back down. Greetings ring out one after another around the table, and the healer introduces himself as Rook, looking at the experienced travelers calmly and resolutely. Under the wooden beams of the tavern, amid the clatter, the boys raise their mugs. Their meeting is just beginning. She explains, although the parts are accurate, the author is not an elf and writes from an outsider's perspective. Hearing this, the healer listens attentively. In her gaze, curiosity still smolders when she asks why he decided to buy it so far. His answer boils down to the search for knowledge such as others might simply not notice. The dishes arrive momentarily, distracting everyone from the conversation. While the others settle down to eat, he feels a bit out of place. The conversation becomes easier as soon as favorite dishes are mentioned. Near the crowded table, the tension eases and turns into simple, warm communication. The healer tasted the food and felt it was unexpectedly delicious. The exquisite sauce and careful preparation reminded him of the refined elven cuisine. Soon even more dishes arrive, fried oysters and a platter of meat. One of the travelers urges him to eat properly, pushing food onto his plate. Light laughter spreads around the table as the feast for the elf becomes livelier. Sharing food with skillful companions is a familiar and comforting feeling. From above it is visible, the gathering is warm, lively, and people are enjoying this moment. The doctor nods thoughtfully. He is truly happy to travel this road. Inside the fortress within the walls, a conversation quietly unfolds. A young woman questions a reserved man about what it means to be a hero. In the stone hall, a young woman asks a question, what a true saint should be like. The hero listens to her across the table, not knowing how to answer. She asks to be called by her name and he awkwardly mentions the training. A wonder where his roots are, it just hangs between them. Polite conversation hides inner confusion, doubt flickers somewhere behind the calm expressions of the face. With a burst of joy, she suggests going together, saying friendship is part of growing up. He is constrained by tension. An angry voice tears the moment as power just enters and tension spreads throughout the entire room. A true devoted book lover kneels before the saint, praises the heroic chronicle, and proclaims how deeply it has moved his soul. He, having opened the book, he insists that its narrative should be regarded as sacred scripture. Passion spills into his voice as he emphasizes the scenes of legendary battles. He glorifies the fallen warrior in the rear and urges the saint not to worry about modesty. She clenches her hands. It is clear that a wave is overwhelming her. He presses on and suggests dedicating time to talks about the hero's greatness. The saint hesitates, and the hero noticeably begins to get nervous. Ignoring the protests, the scientist confidently states that the hero would agree and the tension in the room rises sharply. Left alone on the gallery, Svjata panics because her companions disappear, leaving uneaten food and rising anxiety. Rook enters the tavern and notices that Elise is already waiting with the food she has prepared. She calls him to sit, and Rook puts aside thoughts about dungeon plans and joins her at the table. Later, the rest of the party joins them. Having finished a small task, they relax and watch Rook's strange friendliness. He says he received the blessing of the goddess but treats it as if it is nothing special. The group quickly connects this to his recent growth. After that, mocking reactions begin while Natasha interrogates him about innocence. Laughter rolls in waves, and Rook blushes slightly from embarrassment. A month after meeting the Wings of Light, his progress becomes undeniable, and the table falls into thoughtful silence. Natasha sharply stops Elise before she can reveal an awkward story about Rook. Her reaction shows she already knows in advance what will come out now. The Wings of Light appear as an old band, but over time the members either parted ways or got married. No, only 4 travelers remain. Natasha is revealed as the granddaughter of a former member, raised alongside Rook and Elise. She sees parental figures in them. As soon as this background is mentioned, she quickly interrupts. During dinner, she buries herself in food to avoid further mockery. Elise's youthful appearance does not match her true age. In this world, magic alters aging, and Rook quietly marvels. Over the past month, Rook has trained in the labyrinth, fighting monsters mostly stronger than himself. Every morning, he took steady steps forward. Experience grew through continuous battles. Vigilant observation accompanied every raid. He studied the patterns of thrown items and noticed that rewards ranged from useful tools to worthless stones. Encounters with skeletons showed him the value of holy fire magic. Its effectiveness against the undead surprised him, and his confidence only grew. Fire wolves and goblins, but the spell proved less decisive. Low-level creatures continued to attack relentlessly despite the damage. His noticeable discomfort beside him raised questions. Rook felt that the presence of this man scared monsters in an unusual way. After a month of steady growth, Rook surveys how his life has changed. Lying in his room, he thinks about what brought the most improvements. With a stable income from dungeon fights, he decides to move to a better tavern. There the rooms are cleaner and the atmosphere calmer. That evening, he orders wine and roasted meat at the ends near the counter. The decision seems simple yet pleasant in every detail. As soon as the dish arrives, he immediately notices the difference. The food smells richer and the bed is cleaner than before. Tiger laid out the ingredients and explained what exactly improves the taste. In this world, stronger monsters provide higher quality food. While Rock ate, he quietly thought that the local dishes were simple and lacked variety. He almost imperceptibly wished for richer sauces and more complex meals. Near the counter, adventurers boast about newly learned magic. One proudly tries to create water. The spell barely works, just a small splash. After that, laughter spreads. Others doubt whether he has any talent at all, although he really does have magical abilities. Rook calmly demonstrates controlled fire in his palm. Looking more closely, he realizes someone else at the table is also using magic. Throughout the room, the man carefully warms food with flame. Melted cheese stretches over the dish, revealing a practical use of magic. The fact that cheese exists in this world wildly excites Rook. Without hesitation, he asks the innkeeper where to find it and rushes out like a whirlwind. The price quoted stuns him. Cheese costs several times more than he expected, forcing him to reconsider his expenses. Instead of giving up, he heads to the alchemy shop where grimoires are sold. A new idea begins to form in his mind. Believing that the blessing of his goddess will allow him to control magic more broadly, he asks to see books about the properties of light and contemplates how to test the limits of his powers. After examining the grimoire, he feels no connection to it. For now, his abilities remain limited despite his hopes. Rook recalls stories of veteran mages from past wars who mastered arrow magic. Their numbers, it is said, were large during grand battles. In the shop, he learns that the church buys most of the healing grimoires. Books with healing attributes rarely stay in stock for long. Wealthy buyers quickly purchase everything they see because the church profits from treating injuries. Healing magic remains widely spread. Light attribute healing spells of lower level are rare in ordinary shops. Even powerful grimoires of other types are in short supply. Leaving the shop, Rook thoughtfully weighs everything he has heard. Grimoires teach spells, but true spirit magic seems to live by completely different rules. Rock feels the blessing of the goddess has become stronger. Standing at the entrance to the dungeon, he prepares for his first battle after leveling up. He twitches with electricity as he overcomes the 16th to 18th floors. His speed and strength sharply increase, and he is forced to adapt to heightened sensations. He reaches the stairs to the 19th floor twice as fast as usual. A taunt flashes in his Minda memory of his fear of ghosts. He firmly decides to become better and cautiously moves forward. As he contemplates the upcoming trials, his confidence grows. For the first time stepping over the threshold, he remembers, to defeat phantoms, magic is needed. Clenching his staff tighter, he moves forward alone. On the 19th floor, Rock hears several footsteps descending the stairs awaits ghosts. Instead of spirits from the very top, a company of 4 appears. One figure steps closer from behind and catches Rock by surprise as he quickly turns to face them. In the dark underground stair gallery, a young healer notices a light-haired swordsman descending, hand on his weapon. Sensing danger, he becomes alert and stops moving thoughtlessly. Shadows reveal another armed figure hiding nearby. The dungeon, without any law, attracts criminals who hunt foreigners. Off-screen, companions note, inexperienced solo travelers on lower levels often become easy targets. Pressed against the wall, the healer weighs his options. Acting hastily will provoke conflict, but staying silent and still will encourage an attack. He firmly plants his feet and straightens his staff. The swordsman approaches and carefully examines him from head to toe. It turns out there is no threat, it's just a boy. The tension eases slightly, but vigilance remains. In the corridor, the healer nervously insists that he is just resting, and the woman asks why he is alone in such a dangerous place. Her companion warns not to relax and to stay alert, because appearances can be deceiving. After a short pause, the group decides to move on. She cautiously says goodbye and walks away. When he was left alone, relief washed over him like a wave. He realizes, maybe he was inattentive, but at the same time feels gratitude that he turned out to be just cautious adventurers. Recalling, he understands. The light showed him them, but at the same time hid him from their eyes, teaching a silent lesson attentiveness. On the 19th floor, the doctor freezes for a moment, then forces himself to move on. The doubt still lingers, but he understands he must continue. At the crossroads, he carefully studies the map. The air has become heavier than before, and if he loses his guide, he will remain here without a chance. Unbearable cold spreads through the corridor. Suddenly, from the darkness, a skeletal warrior emerges and moves toward him. Frightened but instantly composed, he retreats to hold his ground. The undead soldier charges forward without hesitation. Instead of running away, he reacts instantly. With a sharp counterattack, he shatters the skeleton, proving he can survive in the dungeon on his own. After he defeated the skeleton, the healer checks his equipment and makes sure everything is intact. His movements were normal. Remembering the other travelers, he decides to proceed just like they did. From somewhere behind, a faint echo sound cautiously looks back. He recalls, most researchers head to the transfer device on the 21st floor, because the 19th and 20th levels are difficult and offer weak rewards. Changing his approach, he slows down, again weighs whether to rush forward and decides not to hurry. Instead, he watches carefully. Another quiet sound reaches him. The grip tightens on the weapon and map, and he has a thought. Is something invisible following him? A crooked laugh cuts through the corridor, and behind the healer appears a giant ghost. Its bony face looms over him. The spirit attacks immediately. Its transparent hand cuts through the defense and squeezes his throat. Panic rises in waves as he struggles against an enemy his weapon cannot harm. Cold energy flows into the ghost as it convulsively gasps for air. Realizing steel is useless, he gathers magic in his free hand. A flash bursts outward at close range and hits the ghost directly. A radiant strike tears its form apart. As the phantom scatters, he falls to the floor, coughs and trembles, but is alive. When the explosion subsides, the healer freezes and looks at the small stone left behind. Realizing the ghost has vanished, he shudders from the fear he just experienced. Squatting down, he picks up a drop and asks if the reward is worth having to look at such horror. Examining the darker gem, he suspects it might be a magical crystal rather than an ordinary stone. Doubt creeps in, and for a moment he thinks about retreating. Pride does not let him turn away so quickly. Then he reviews his map and admits it lacks details about ghosts. But despite this, he decides to be vigilant, knows that light magic can defeat them if they appear again. The healer contemplates how to note down everything he has learned about ghosts. Checking the guess, he absorbs their essence and confirms the method works. He, gathering his strength, shoots a whole beam of light into the corridor. The explosion throws the ghost back, but fear still clings to him. Testing further, he finds out light magic works best, while other holy spells make almost no difference. Approaching the transmission device, he notices that the runny nose avoids this area. He trains to maintain the sacred flame in case of emergencies. Return to the city, sells a magic crystal and receives 6 gold coins, so progress goes steadily. At the Healer Guild counter, they ask to wait until his achievements are confirmed. An agency employee calls out, "I allow." After he shows the guild card, he is informed that he has met the conditions for promotion. The staff ask for the card to process the update. The receptionist suddenly starts stamping the card forcefully, carefully adjusting its position to ensure the imprint is correct. Having finished, she returns the greeting card. He accepts it gratefully while she wipes sweat from her forehead. Later, after resting in his room, he studies the updated mark on the card and contemplates how rank enhances the trust and status of the traveler. At the guild, the healer learns rank advancement depends on the quality and quantity of magic stones submitted. Regional differences affect the calculations. Turning back into the room, he thinks about how to obtain stronger magical crystals in the future. Memories of Ghost's grip still confuse him, despite his progress. He, full of determination to grow, performs a summoning ritual and calls for the help of a fairy he trusts. Instead of reassurance, he encounters a strange, unnaturally indifferent reaction from Lee. Confidence vanishes when he realizes something is wrong with her. Lisa sits, her face turned aside and her shoulders are trembling. The boy notices her silence and feels something went wrong. Tears stream down her face as she wonders why he never called. Doubt fills her heart and she feels he might hate her. For a moment, confusion flashes across his face and then he remembers. Almost 30 days have passed since he last contacted her. Frightened, he quickly explains that work kept him busy all the time. Raised hands and tense, urgent posture reveal his sincerity. Not holding back tears, Lee admits that she felt he did not love her. Belated remorse overwhelms him when he realizes his silence caused her pain. The boy promises that from now on he will call Lee properly and even swears this, pinky promising. The tension between them eases a little. A little later, he trains alone. Magic shakes his body, but he still continues to summon it, fighting in battle. In a matter of days, he reaches the 2nd level and encounters the undead. Standing in the stone corridor, he thinks about how the Lee's challenge gives him support. With every battle comes growth. After resting, he wonders whether it is worth buying her a souvenir. Her presence has become important to him. Determination settles in him. He senses too ahid lifeless. He braces himself and steps forward. In the stone chamber, a skeleton stands to the right and a ghost stretches to the left. The boy instantly recognizes both threats and prepares to act. Raises his hand and releases holy flame towards the skeleton. Bright sacred flashes burst forward, strike the body and throw it back. Power returns when power calls again for cleansing. The light engulfs the skeleton, then explodes from within, tearing its bones apart. Smoke disperses over the floor. He notices how the practice with holy magic has undermined his control and accelerated his movements. Scattered everywhere near the door. Among them lies a blue grimoire that fell from the ghost. It marks an unexpected reward. Holding the blue grimoire in his hands, he recalls, monsters cannot appear in small rooms where someone is busy. The power gathers in his hand as soon as he activates the spell. Light spreads across the floor, and he releases the power carefully. Finally, the glow fills the room, enveloping him in a quiet reflection. The spell stabilizes without any resistance. He calmly studies the details. Thick walls block most of the view, but doors and thin partitions are still visible within a limited distance. Shift ahead through the corridor, he sees a skeleton behind the wall. The spell proves its worth by revealing enemies even before they appear. While walking, he keeps the magic active. Anxiety still rings in his head as if he missed something important. Pausing for a moment, he admits he lacks experience in evaluating information in this world. For now, he focuses on carefully checking the locations. He examines the structure, studies the thickness of the walls. Inside deeper, there seems to be a passage. Having checked one side and encountering a dead end, he calmly turns around and proceeds down the corridor, step by step mapping the plan. At the end of the corridor, he notices the wall looks thinner than it should be. An irregularity catches his eye. He presses his palm to the surface, compares it with the map in his head. Suddenly, a hidden space opens behind the wall. Excitement grows as he searches for a switch or hidden trigger. He inspects the floor in the nearest stones, nothing unusual. Suspecting that the entrance might be in a side passage, he decides to break through by force. Determination pushes him to try. The blow against the wall yields nothing. Without special skills or tools, he snaps from despair and falls, already realizing he cannot open it. Lying on the floor, he considers whether to report the strange wall to the guild. Doubt does not leave him, but curiosity holds him. He does not leave. Again, he carefully studies the blocks. One section is slightly different from the others. It seems a mechanism is hidden there. Leaning on his staff, he feels the surface and measures the space the hidden switch responds, and the wall slides, revealing the entrance. Inside stands a quiet gate altar, and on it lies a single bag. He examines it from the threshold, not entering the room. Having carefully counted everything, he rushed inside and grabbed the bag from the altar. Nothing happened and the room was silent again. He carefully inspects the pouch. The leather and fabric look ordinary, no hint of its true nature. He opens it and inside is only darkness. No matter how he peers, the space seems infinitely black. Curious, he hides the object inside to check. The object disappears from sight. He flinches from surprise but remains interested. An epiphany overtakes him and excitement spreads across his face. The pouch turns out to be a magical storage bag, so he celebrates acquiring such a rare treasure. A broad smile spreads across his face as he imagines how much easier future dungeon raids will be with the magical bag. For now, he secures the bag to his belt and plans to study it thoroughly later in the tavern. Caution grounds his excitement. Magical bags are rare and valuable, so showing them can attract unwanted attention. Considering options, he thinks to hide it under his clothes to avoid suspicion on the road. Suddenly, a strange sound cuts into his thoughts. He turns toward the noise. Nearby, he sees a large figure, and its appearance shatters that brief moment of relief. In the place for spells, he notices a ghost moving behind the wall and immediately cleanses it. Leaving the dungeon, he passes by the guards with quiet satisfaction. Success is evident in his posture, but he keeps the details to himself. A little later, he walks through the city, reflecting on his gains, unaware of the upcoming troubles. He feels such luck may attract unwanted attention. The young healer comes to the guild and sees a hall full of adventurers and merchants. Finding no chance to trade safely, he decides to wait. He takes a quiet spot and hides the magic satchel under his cloak. Caution governs every move as he avoids unnecessary glances. The money earned in the labyrinth gives him a choice. Upgrading armor and footwear is practical for future battles. He remembers selling a dark magic crystal for 6 gold coins. The price of the white magic stone is still unclear. Unsure of the price, he thinks first to consult a blacksmith or alchemist before deciding whether to sell. So the healer studies the white magic stone, notices how it reflects light, and decides not to sell it. But he shows the crystal to Elias to confirm before they can talk further. Rada approaches with energy. Radis quickly apologizes and leaves with his companion. The healer watches them go, embarrassed by their haste. Later, Elias informs him that the light magic crystal was not found among his belongings. He admits he did not sell it. He asks about the price, learns that depending on the rank it can range from 30 to 100 gold coins, so he begins to reconsider his decision. The doctor weighs the rarity of light magical crystals and their excessively high price compared to dark crystals. While he eats, he thinks about who actually needs such an expensive thing, since lower-level ghost hunters have to manage without it. Leaning back, he recalls, ghosts drop sacred grimoires not like crystals, which raises doubts. He reviewed past encounters in his mind. Skeletons dropped chaotic grimoires while ghosts left dark crystals and other items. Unsure about the scheme, he decides the only way to test the theory is to return to the dungeon and investigate directly. The doctor decides to postpone the dungeon investigation. Instead, he focuses on studying the magical bag he recently received. To test it, he places a bowl inside and feels it shift in the hidden space. As soon as he retrieves the item, it responds to his intent. He encourages and puts even more things inside. Each item fits in place without crowding the space inside. Then he tests larger items and finds the limit. Anything wider than the opening cannot enter. Satisfied with the results, he plans further experiments and thinks about how to effectively use the bag for future travels. The next day, the healer goes to the market. He buys smoked meat, salt, and vegetables, listening to sellers praising their goods. Remembering that time flows inside the magical satchel, he avoids fresh meat and takes dried food instead. When he pulls out the bottle, it feels cold. Having finished shopping, he heads to the distillery. Barrels stretch along the walls as he greets the shopkeeper. Curious, he asks what the difference is between first-class wine and second-class wine. The owner explains the quality and production. He studies the prices in silver coins and considers whether to buy a bottle, thinking about long-term storage. After hearing the explanations, the healer decides to buy one bottle of each variety. The owner prepares the wine and gives a brief warning that one should not drink too much. Carrying both bottles, he leaves the shop and steps again onto the bustling street. The burden slows his pace, his movements become awkward. To pass through a narrow passage, he hides the spear and belongings in the magic bag, and the space proves its usefulness once again. Freed from the burden, he heads to the city gates and checks the next target. Entering the northern district, he notices an exquisite atmosphere and realizes he has reached the elite quarter. In the northern district, the healer notices glass windows embedded in elegant buildings. The patterns of stains show limited technology, so each window costs a lot. Such luxury confirms he has entered the private part of the city. The crowd calmly stretches along straight, clean streets lined with exquisite shops. He feels this place is not for ordinary travelers. Well-dressed nobles sit at tables outside and leisurely savor sweets, engaging in conversations. The atmosphere seems far from the rough life near the labyrinth. Hearing about an elite sweet shop nearby, he realizes entering will not be easy, especially in the state he is in now. Outside the sweet shop, the healer studies the prices and understands how expensive they are. The spear in his hands distinguishes him among the refined customers. Despite the tension, he goes in and orders one of each. The sellers accept his order without any hesitation. After that, he goes to the Western District for additional purchases, then returns to the hotel, exhausted and seemingly out of place. In his room, he sets the table and prepares a small dinner with wine and sweets. Satisfied with the taste, he recalls how much money he spent and calms down a bit. At least one purchase was definitely not in vain. In his room, the healer lights a lantern with a holy flame. The sacred fire flares evenly, confirming that the spell works. Sighing contentedly, he checks the new equipment he just bought. The lantern works properly, and he plans to measure later how effective it is. He lays out clothes and changes into a new set. He carefully adjusts each item until it fits comfortably. A magical pouch is hidden under his robe, no bulge, no hint outside, nothing looks strange externally. After cleaning his armor with a cleanser, he notices worn sleeves. He decides to postpone repairs, packs the gear, and prepares to rest. The doctor notices a barely visible scratch on the body and recalls it was left by the forest wolf in Langford. His hand slides to the pendant on his chest. He remembers how it still stays close to him from the very beginning of his journey. Sitting quietly in his room, he takes off the pendant and places it back, grateful for its protection. The young healer prepares a small plate of treats at his table, carefully arranging cookies and cake. After finishing the preparation, he calls for rent and recalls how rare sweet food is in this world, so he decides to share it while it is still fresh. A little girl appears and fixes her gaze on the plate with shining eyes. The wonder moment by moment turns into wild delight as soon as she notices the treats lying before her. He explains the candies were bought for her. Having received permission, she moves closer to the plate without any hesitation. She greedily eats, savoring every bite and watching how much she likes it. He tasted it himself and it reminded him of distant memories. The little girl stubbornly continues eating, consuming more sweets than her tiny body allows. The healer silently watches, and in her gaze is restrained surprise. Crumbs scatter across the table as she argues over the last piece of cake. Almost full, yet she does not stop, unwilling to waste it. Seeing the leftover food, he offers to take it home. Careful hands wrap the candies in paper and secure them tightly. The package is already ready. He gives it to her. She tightly presses the bundle to her chest and excitedly rushes away. Left alone, then he remembers how she spoke about tomorrow and has no idea what awaits him there. In the forest, a giant golem swiftly rams through the thickets. Trees scatter apart. The knight intercepts it head-on, strikes its body, and aims at the place where the radiant magic stone is embedded. The stone shatters under the final blow, and the creature collapses and turns into a pile of fragments. Joy spreads among the squad as soon as the threat disappears. After the battle, attention shifts to the wounded. The doctor checks Luciana's condition, while others assess their wounds nearby. Despite her insistence that she can continue, fatigue shows on her face. The team begins to make their way through the forest in search of a safer place to rest. The old traveler reproachfully asks about the destroyed magic stone, emphasizing how valuable its power was. The knight calmly takes responsibility for this decision. After the battle, the elderly man reflects on the shattered magic stone. The knight responds calmly, clarifying where they stand and what intentions they hold. Next, they briefly explain how monsters drop stones depending on how exactly they were defeated. The conversation changes. The group prepares to move on. When the matter is settled, they continue through the forest. The mood brightens slightly. The trees part, revealing a clearing. They stop as soon as something unusual appears ahead. All eyes are fixed forward, armored footsteps slow down. In the very center of the clearing stands a monument bathed in light. It marks the resting place of a legendary hero. In front of the monument, the party gathers around an embedded sword. After a brief hesitation, it is drawn from its sheath and the ground responds as hidden mechanisms activate. Beneath them appears a stone corridor and it leads into a labyrinth filled with identical doors. The doctor examines the passage and realizes these are not ordinary ruins. Inside, skeletal remains stir on the floor. He raises his hand and releases cleansing magic. The undead crumbles to dust. Having examined the fallen stone, he concludes that it fits the usual magical core. His thoughts return again to the theory he has been testing since early morning. More skeletons rush down the corridor, but repeated bursts of cleansing stop their advance. Gazing at the scattered magical stones, the healer contemplates his theory. Although the results seem ordinary, he knows one case is not enough to confirm anything. In the dark corridor, he senses movement ahead and realizes that other travelers are fighting nearby. He calmly studies the situation. After the next cleansing spell, a glowing crystalline shard ignites and forms. The flame of joy runs across the features of his face, but he forces himself to maintain a cold composure. Picking up the newly acquired light magic crystal, he releases a controlled spell towards the approaching skeletons, testing his hypothesis in real combat. Later, under the open sky, he admits only one crystalline drop that he dropped that day, and leaves the research unfinished. After the healer receives payment for the magic stones, he is stopped by a guild official who asks for a moment of his time. Inside, she explains that the Travelers Guild supports travelers while continuously gathering information about nearby dungeons and monsters. Sitting opposite, he listens as she talks about their faith. Updated knowledge about monsters and their drops must always be shared. Some of the elders add that the guild will not blame anyone if someone uses the found information personally. However, she emphasizes, leaving the city without sharing valuable findings will mean significant losses, and this deeply worries the guild. During the meeting, a representative of the guild states that his information is valuable and officially requests written reports with the results of his research. She places 200 gold coins on the table as an advance, showing that the guild is truly serious. Maintaining composure, he listens while she asks how he managed to obtain the light magic crystal inside the dungeon. Remembering the strange drops from the skeletons he defeated with sacred magic, he delves into thought and recalls a strange pattern he noticed. Organizing his observations, he concludes, when the undead are cleansed with holy magic, the attributes of their discarded items change to the opposite. In the guild house, a woman tightens her face, explaining that no records mention how the light magic crystals appeared in the Ella labyrinth. She outlines only options, hinting the crystal was either taken from the dungeon or obtained by other means, and the tension in the room grows. She asks for full disclosure for the sake of future travelers and cautiously interrogates him, closely watching his reaction. He calmly responds, notices that she is testing him, and avoids saying whether the crystal really came from the dungeon. She notes his recent arrival and strange interest in magical crystals, quietly tightening the knot of her suspicions. The official representative of the guild closely nags him about the timing accuracy of the crystal while he balances his breathing and carefully considers his next response. Luke walks down the wooden corridor of the inn and climbs the stairs, leaning on his staff. Upon reaching the room, he quietly closes the door behind him. Exhaustion overwhelms him as soon as he collapses onto the bed. Failed negotiations regarding light magic crystals weigh heavily on his mind. He had previously refused to reveal what he knows. Understanding the connection to sacred magic, he chose silence to avoid danger. The woman and the guild official interpret his warnings as a secret. Suspicion fills the room. Without warning, the guild master restrains him while the blade is pressed to his throat, and the tension turns into force. Luke insists that the light magic crystal is a gift won during the defense of the city. He demands that they verify his records with the Langford Guild. Memories of that battle surface as he explains this supposed blessing, and suspicion still does not fade, despite his arguments. But in his room, he does not sleep, convinced that someone is watching both the guild and the inn. He thinks about searching for the Wings of Light, a group that relies on sacred magic and fears provoking the guild. After practicing magic all night, sleep overtakes him and he returns to the city late, still undecided. Luke buys an apple at the market and notices its bitterness, while simultaneously sensing that someone is following him down the street. In the guild hall, adventurers crowd together even though the morning is still in full swing. Having chosen a route, he enters the transfer hall and heads to the upper floors of the dungeon. During the ascent, he notices the adventurers are also coming down from the 20th floor. Their wary behavior confirms that they are tracking him. By the time he reaches the 19th floor, he continues moving forward. A man watches him from behind a wall, thus proving that the chase has not stopped. On the 18th floor, Luca pushes forward through the corridor, and his pursuers find it difficult to keep him in sight in the darkness. Anticipating their route, he rushes without light and reaches for the 16th floor, trying to get ahead. From a corner, he notices two travelers standing near the transfer monument, as if staged by a trap. Deciding that escape is most important, he notices another group returning through the passage and quickly makes a plan. One, discreetly reducing his presence, goes behind the group, trying to blend in with them and make it seem as if their meeting is a coincidence. On the 16th floor, Luke hides behind a wall while the ambushers wait near the transfer room. They do not suspect that he has already gotten ahead of them. Seizing the moment, he dashed to the transfer monument and slipped past the crowd, leaving them confused until it was too late to realize who had just passed by. Reaching another level, he notices that even more adventurers have gathered near the rooms and realizes this pursuit has become massive. When the stairs are blocked, he crashes into familiar faces from his former party circle and immediately draws the attention of those nearby. Against the backdrop of tension, he receives a warning to leave the city immediately while armed adventurers gather around the monument. Luke is dragged along by his former comrades. They insist that they must go to the restaurant before the seats are taken. Although he is confused, he follows them as they leave the crowded place together. Late that night, he returns to his room and quietly prepares to leave. After a brief farewell, he decides it's time to move on. Outside, he meets Rada, confirms that he is not carrying anything extra, and keeps his belongings packed in a magical bag. The two walk through dark streets while hidden figures in the shadows behind watch them. Noticing three pursuers, they calmly turn into a narrow alley, leading the tale onto a more controlled path. In the alley, the three pursuers search thoroughly, believing that Luke and his companion have disappeared. Nearby in the shadows, two cloaked figures observe everything. They see the pursuers have split up, trying to surround Luke. The hooded pair discussed how the tension had started earlier that day and confirmed their readiness to help him, even though it was already late. Step by step along the dark street, they explain. When the guild's attention is focused on him, sneaking through the labyrinth unnoticed is no longer possible. Somewhere in the shadows, rumors circulate. Luke is supposedly under threat and was forced to reveal what he knows about the light magical crystal. At the tavern, Lucas learns. After that night, tension spread throughout the city. The guild placed adventurers at key locations to watch him. The conversation shifts to how demand for light magic crystals is growing, and to internal strife within the guild. Perhaps that is why it suddenly showed aggression. He acknowledged the unstable situation. His companions warn the guild leader has considerable power and can act harshly. When night falls on the land, Elise begins to make an escape plan and suggests moving to the Republic of Canada abroad. From the roof, they peer down at the streets below, watch the posts, and prepare to cross carefully, keeping away from those who are watching. In a dark street, Elise orders Lucas to stay behind and remain vigilant. She feels someone is hiding nearby and prepares to act. From behind a sign, they watch an observer hidden near the house. Quietly coordinating, they decide to lure him out. Elise raises her bow and, using her skill, calls a stray dog under the building. The animal responds and moves at her signal. The arrow cuts through the night, breaking the observer's calm. The dog lunges forward, forcing him to jump out of cover and breaking his position. When the distraction works, Elise signals the attack and presses the advantage until the attacker loses control. Two travelers chased Lucas down a narrow street and could not understand how he had quietly replaced their observer. They conclude he is hiding his true power and decide to corner him carefully, knowing there may be ambushes ahead. They are convinced he is not an ordinary traveler, and they suspect that he has already cleared the dangerous floors of the dungeon, hiding his full power. Moving to another passage, they believe that they have finally reached the right place and prepare to meet him face to face. The street is blocked by a large group. They want to capture Luke and force him to reveal information before he can leave the city. Rada steps forward to confront the group, blocking their way, and decides to detain them so that Luke can move freely. Elise and another companion wait in a dark corridor, feeling the tension throughout the city. Luke prays that his allies remain safe. Elise believes that the guild's pursuit may be driven by interest in light magic crystal sand. Perhaps they even pretend to cooperate to extract information. Later, Luke reflects on her unexpected insight and concludes she has already seen the whole situation and understood more than he had imagined. A fairy named Lyslot appears before him. From their first meeting, her words always sounded obscure, but the exit to this world helped him interpret their meaning. He recalls the riddle about the giant boar that relentlessly rushes through Langford. And now the words about Mr. Pig sound not like nonsense, but as a warning. The day after tomorrow, it begins to rain. It coincides with another riddle she once spoke. Watching from the window, he realizes this pattern can no longer be ignored. He concludes that Lyslot is capable of seeing fragments of the future. Her recent sign warns of danger tomorrow. Relying on the magic of fairy summoning, he carefully prepares for what awaits him. Relying on the signs that indicated to her from the very beginning, he immediately resorts to summoning magic, calls the fairy and seeks advice. As soon as she appears, he decides to leave the city with the help of an elf he knows. Trust in her warnings only strengthens his determination. Later, two figures in cloaks questioned him about light magic crystals. They could not uncover the existence of the fairy. He denied everything and said he knew nothing. His reactions are read as too calculated to ignore. He senses they are hiding interest in the crystals and are closely watching him so. Suspicion only grows stronger. Their careless remark confirms that they are indeed snooping in search of bright magical crystals. The girl hidden under the cloak explains that she is looking for a large, bright magical crystal Kisha to deepen her mastery. She says that each crystal carries its own wavelength, and it is this that forms the power. He responds with mild interest, focusing on the properties of the crystal rather than its source. She mentions a forbidden book and warns that its contents must not be distributed. They head towards the castle walls, breaking through a quiet path. She admits she bought that book only to remove it from circulation. Fields stretch beyond the wall. Her search magic gives no reaction. From above, someone silently watches them. He notices a distant chimney pipe despite disrupted search magic and realizes someone is watching from above there. A figure stands on the roof. She suspects a far-seeing traveler and understands that action must be taken immediately. An arrow is released, and in the alley the explosion tears the silence, making everyone below jump from their places. Smoke fills the street while they interrogate. Was the explosion magic or an accident? The observer flees north across the rooftops without hesitation. He pursues, tracking movement with cold precision. The arrow crashes into a stone wall as the cloaked pursuer rushes up the stairs. She leaps forward, and they manage to lose themselves in the bustle and remain unnoticed. Reaching the roof, they look over the quiet town. The explosion thundered in the western block, but they decide not to intervene and prepare to retreat. They descend the wall on a rope and plan to take a carriage. Soon the guard might take an interest in the explosion. Outside the walls, they search for Rosha, but the surroundings are strangely empty. In the forest, no one is visible, but danger hides deep among the trees. Suddenly, the ground bursts beneath their feet. Arrows rain down swiftly, striking the ground and the wall around them. The attack blocks the escape route and drives them into shelter. They realize the attack comes from the darkness. It becomes clear that this is a planned ambush. The second wave approaches before they can reorganize. An arrow pierces her side. The wound shows a deadly poison, one meant to weaken, not kill instantly. As the toxin spreads, she tries to speak through convulsions and recognizes the forest as the source of the arrows it supports. Meanwhile, he scans the trees. Resolutely setting out to take revenge, he releases a sphere of light into the forest and reveals a hidden threat inside. The beast flees into the darkness, but Eliz falls. The poison takes hold. A carriage departs from the gates and he calls Rosa. He quickly explains that they were ambushed, and that the lease was concluded with a poisoned arrow. The armored driver listens and prepares to move. A volley of arrows strikes the carriage as they are already rising upwards, realizing they are being targeted. The driver shouts to urge the horses forward at full speed. Inside the moving wagon, Eliza's breathing becomes shallow and tense. The poison rapidly spreads through her body. The driver orders him to find high-level elixirs and an antidote stored in a box. He rushes off to search while the carriage races through the night. The armored driver swings a broad strike of light, cutting a path for himself, and forces the pursuers to retreat as the carriage tears forward through the night. In the wagon, Eliza cannot swallow the antidote. The poison has spread too deeply. She barely stays conscious and feels her strength fading. Fear grips him as he recalls the kindness of the wings of light and the promise to return alive. Sitting beside her, he pours the remnants of power into the holy magic and releases a wave of sacred wind to expel the toxin. Light bursts from the carriage, and the driver is taken by surprise as the healing energy grows stronger than expected. The morning sunlight rises as Eliza regains consciousness. He explains that he applied restorative magic, thus easing the driver's anxiety. The cart travels along the river between steep cliffs. The driver advises him to keep a course south to Ruta, while they meanwhile move east to divert the pursuit. Stopping, Eliz thanks him for saving her life and hands over supplies for the journey. The driver acknowledges the danger they had to face. The conversation is interrupted by an attack in the market. The driver suspects behind the wheel their escape might have been used by another group. They conclude that the guilds probably needed information, not death. The poisoned arrow was not lethal. The guild secretary asks to help Roku, warning that he might be in danger. She says that honest people work in the guild and gather information from all sides, the most diverse. Eliz notices long careers often spark envy and hide judgment in the shadows. He wonders why they became a target. She lists his rare abilities: long-range detection and powerful healing. Her words hint that he stands out more than he realizes. Quietly smiling, she says they will meet again and reminds him talent can attract misfortune. He takes this calmly. Finally, he sets off alone, asking them to convey his gratitude to their comrades. He said goodbye to his comrades, quietly waved his hand in farewell, then turned onto a new road. This farewell marked the beginning of another journey alone. Familiar memories from the surface of Elm as he walks. Over those months, he met many people and experienced battles that shaped his growth. Nostalgia briefly slows his steps, but he still moves forward despite the sorrow that still lingers. Approaching the cliff, he sees an endless ocean ahead. Excitement pushes out doubt and he sets off towards new adventures. On the wooden table, baked fish with herbs is served. Next to it stands a mug of local beer. In the tavern, the young healer examines the dish while a little girl signals that she knows a better way to enjoy it. He cuts off a large piece of fish and is ready to try her method. It is said, following her instruction, he eats that piece in one bite. The rich flavor spreads instantly and he remains satisfied. Then he swallows a whole gulp of dark ale and she calmly watches. The mixed taste impresses him, and a more balanced and unforgettable sensation appears. In the Ruth Tavern, locals proudly recall the mountain water, the source of their famous beer. It is lively and at the same time hospitable there. The horned woman warrior confidently raises a mug at the counter while a bearded man jokes about customs. She replies boldly without a drop of hesitation and immediately orders ale. While laughter rolls between them, they raise their mugs. The exchange shows the town's open and friendly spirit. After parting ways with his former companions, the young healer heads south to the port city of Ruth and notices these warm interactions. Later, he travels alone, carefully setting up camp and moving quickly, relying on the sacred fire to ward off monsters. Rushing without delay, the young healer reaches Ruth faster than expected. Passing through the gate, he notices a large caravan column and on the horizon the national border. He says this to gather information and replenish supplies. He decides to stay overnight, so he leaves the tavern through the village to survey the surroundings. Ruta stretches across steep slopes near the water, winding along mountains and cliffs. Houses and stairs crowd the landscape, forming a lively port metropolis. He descends a long stone ladder. He watches as workers at the pier handle a huge fish. The place distracts him for a moment. In the shop, he buys candles and inquires about boats to Harmstow, but learns that none go there. In the shop, the healer buys dried fish and thinks about crossing the mountains as soon as he learns that sea routes are blocked by dangerous monsters along the coast. The shopkeeper explains that the mountain path is just as dangerous and unsuitable for horses. Taking the warning, he decides to prepare thoroughly. Barely smiling, the merchant proudly sells him several sacks of salt and reminds him that Ruta is famous for this. That evening, he relaxes among smiling townsfolk, enjoying the lively atmosphere and the brief, warm company. Morning commenced, although he has everything for comfort, he leaves Ruta, wondering if he will ever taste such wonderful beer again. The forest trail, the healer notices two merchants and their guard ahead. Seeing the broken path, he realizes horses cannot pass through such terrain. As he climbs higher, Ruta below becomes very small. The steep mountain road quickly exhausts him. Soon the trees thin out and sharp cliffs fill the landscape. The barren land looks uninhabitable even for large monsters. Among the stones, he discovers a narrow beast trail using magical sight. He sneaks cautiously, stepping over uneven ground. He remains alert, watching for small creatures nearby. Crawling through a narrow mountain pass, the healer wonders if this harsh path really marks a national border. Giant stones block almost all routes, so he is forced to carefully push forward. Climbing to a higher section, he watches the distant peak and assumes it is close to the boundary. Exhaustion catches up and he stops to catch his breath. Finding a flat patch of stone, he decides to rest briefly and considers whether to eat here. Suddenly, the ground slips from under his feet. Frightened, he barely keeps his balance as debris falls and breaks away downward. Peering into a crevice below, he feels a strange connection with some presence waiting under the stones. Behind a fallen stone, the healer finds a strange black mass woven with roots. Its surface resembles stone but holds an unnatural sensation. Looking more closely, he senses something is connected to him. The substance looks like tar or dark mold, and touching it causes sharp discomfort in the body. Thinking it might be an unclean sediment, he decides to test his holy magic, confident that purification will reveal the truth. He prepares a spell. With a steady hand, he casts purification. The black mass dissolves under the sacred light. In the end, as the traces vanish, a tall stone gate marked with a symbol emerges outside. He trembles from what he has uncovered and what it might mean. Standing before the bare stone gate, the healer wonders why it was hidden under debris and placed in such a remote mountain location. The structure is deliberately concealed from human eyes. Examining the surface, he notices symbols carved on a white stone slab resembling marble. As soon as his hand touches it, the signs faintly glow. In a moment, the sealed entrance slides and opens. He steps back in amazement as a dark crack appears in the rock. Inside, stairs descend into the shadow. Traces of the black substrate that was there before have appeared as stains on the steps. Sitting near the entrance, he decides that the dirt comes from there as well and freezes before moving further. Before stepping into the open gap, the healer stops and weighs whether to enter. He is sure what is inside may be connected to him. And as soon as he calls, suddenly a fairy appears. At the same moment, a distant rumble responds from below, warning of danger deeper in the passage. The fairy urgently points downward, sensing a girl in trouble. Realizing someone needs help, she focuses and is ready to move without hesitation. The fairy explains that people are trapped in the deep darkness and cannot break free. The healer realizes he is left alone and the suffering is his own. The stairs covered with mold descend downward. Anxiety grows, but he understands there is no other way to them. Support only strengthens his resolve. The trust placed in him removes hesitation and he takes responsibility. His gratitude and the fairy hands him a potion from the village elders. He takes it, but is still unsure what it is meant for. Suddenly the fairy disappears, a flash of light, and that's it. Left alone, he studies the potion, realizing that it alone can decide the fate of salvation. The doctor crosses the threshold despite the black substance spreading around. Curiosity overcomes caution, and he enters the stone structure not sure if the fairy truly deserves trust. New stairs appear ahead, and instead of the dark mold thinning, it becomes thicker. With every step deeper it clings to the walls and floor. Reaching the platform, he notices the stairs converge into a long zigzag all the way down. Saving magic, he decides not to clean the mold yet. A quiet sound echoes in the corridor. He freezes and listens carefully in the dim light. At the lowest level, a black puddle froze on the ground and blocked his way. The black mud begins to tremble. Its surface ripples, then rises from the ground, forming an unstable mass. Without warning, the creature lunges forward. The healer barely manages to dodge the blow and realizes this is a slime born of mold. He parries the strike with the pole, but it only hisses from the touch. The monster quickly recoils, proving this is not ordinary slime. Dark liquid splashes in the air, forcing it to retreat. Fear grows as he imagines mold touching his body. Realizing that physical attacks are useless, he compresses magic in his hand and releases a compressed sphere of light towards the rushing slime. The sphere of light strikes the slime and burns through its body. Black liquid collapses onto the floor. Among the ruins, he finds a dark crystal. Its power suggests that the creature was much stronger than expected, and he carefully preserves it. More and more Slizniv appear along the passage. He fights them one by one, collecting similar crystals as he moves deeper underground. Eventually, the corridor ends in a solid wall. Doubt tightens his chest, but his magical sight shows a large hidden cavity behind it. He believes the hidden remains under a cover. He cleans the surface. When the black substance disappears, a metal handle emerges from the stone. The healer presses, slides, and turns the handle, but nothing happens. After a moment, he pulls it towards himself and the mechanism finally shifts. The hidden wall slides aside, revealing a huge hall behind it. The entire floor is littered with broken shards and scattered remains. Inside, the space resembles an old amphitheater. A black crystal grows from the wall, and he carefully carves a small sample. In the center stands a large statue covered with a dark patina, hinting at corruption. He prepares to cleanse it. Examining the figure closely, he recognizes the form of the supreme deity worshipped in this world, its name, origin, and blessings. The healer studies the statue again and suddenly realizes this is a chapel dedicated to the supreme deity. The scale of the room confirms its religious purpose. The reflective surfaces of the divine figure that watched over his transformation. He is troubled by the thought, is that being connected to this place? This thought confuses him. The memory of that encounter makes the atmosphere heavier and more suspicious. Without delay, he decides to fulfill the request quickly. Staying inside the spoiled chapel is dangerous for his health. Beyond the corridors outside the chamber, he carefully examines the structure and concludes that the path he took was most likely a hidden emergency entrance. He cleans the door and freezes in the corridor ahead. Since he does not know where the girl disappeared, he chooses the most direct path. Entering another room, he again wipes off the black coating. The habit of searching every corner slows him down. After cleaning several areas, fatigue sets in. Constant use of cleansing consumes more magic than expected. Studying the structure of the church, he realizes if he checks each room separately, he will be exhausted to the limit. Instead, he narrows his focus and unfolds his magical vision within a small radius, concentrating on detecting any presence hidden nearby. His focused magic begins to respond. He expands the sensation. He imagines that something secret is hidden under the bed and inside the cracked wall. Outside the hiding place, he finds coins and several magical manuals. The collection suggests the ruins were used for training, not for ordinary worship. He leans back for a moment and contemplates the find. The information is useful, yet at the same time it raises even more questions about how the chapel recently fell. Examining the books, he understands most of the spells exceed his current capabilities. Still, if he plans using magical sight, he can avoid further danger. Persistently, he raises his hand again and activates his detection spell, preparing to search deeper in the quiet corridor. There, looking with magical sight, he notices gigantic figures moving beyond the sealed area. In the darkness, a massive slime crawls over the ruins in space, and its size far exceeds that of the one he fought earlier, confirming danger ahead. Fear tightens his chest. Encountering such a creature alone is reckless, but abandoning the mission means betraying the trust placed in him. He steadies his breathing and chooses survival over pride. Saving the girl trapped is more important than defeating the monster. Surveying the wide, cylindrical temple, he looks for a bypass that avoids the central corridor blocked by debris. After he breaks down the structure, he circles the temple and flees through the ruins behind it, rather than going straight head-on against the massive slime. Quietly, stealthily, he moves between the columns, keeping his steps light. For a moment, it seems the gigantic creature has not noticed him. Suddenly, a presence approaches ahead. He freezes as a huge shadow slides near the corridor. An explosively harsh blow pierces the building through and through. Debris flies and the entrance collapses, blocking his retreat path. Seeing that he has been detected, he calls a lantern of light and rushes forward, fleeing, relying on the illumination to find his way. He fires a focused ball of light at the massive slime. The impact explodes on contact, but the creature remains unharmed. In a moment, the giant body thuds to the ground and blocks the escape route. He is stuck in the broken corridor. A lonely healer advances through the ruined stone corridors and sees a huge black slimy mass in his path. A dark coating spreads from its body, covering the ground. Suddenly, the creature releases a long-range flash attack. A wave of boulders scatters while he barely dodges, realizing escaping in this uneven terrain is almost impossible. Despite its size, the slime moves quickly. He notices a brief pause between attacks and prepares a light spell, waiting for the right moment. And when the next assault ends, he decisively steps forward and strikes right at its core. The power of holy power bursts through his weapon, and the cleansing spell incinerates the slime, ending the threat. He raises his hand and expands the magic. A spear of light kills into the black slime, piercing all the way to its very essence. Energy surges through his hand as he squeezes out the cleansing at full strength. The beast wildly convulses and tries to crush the weapon stuck in it. A blinding wave flashes in the tunnel and shakes the ruins. Pain spreads throughout his body, yet he endures as the holy power covers and crushes the monster. When the light fades, he sinks for a moment, wounded but alive. The mass disintegrates into scattered sediment. Breathing heavily, he stands up again and prepares to collect the magic stone. Among the remains of the dissolved slime, he notices a large, bright magical crystal zinc on the ground. Soon he notices a smooth egg nearby. He realizes it is made of black slime, so he wonders where it came from. While he holds the shell, a strange splash flows through it. It occurs to him, perhaps it belongs to a holy creature that did not allow itself to be swallowed. Carefully, he decides to take the egg with him. He feels it needs protection, not abandonment. Entering deeper into the sanctuary ruins, he examines the destroyed walls and concludes, there must be another hidden passage ahead. Behind a huge rock, he finds a narrow tunnel, partially filled with debris, although it is clear. It leads somewhere deeper underground. Entering inside, he immediately understands. The structure resembles not an ordinary passage, but a shaft. The air here is different, not at all like on the routes he has already passed. When the entrance to the shrine is destroyed, retreat is impossible. He tightens his spear and decides to move forward despite the risk of monsters. Inspecting his weapon, he notices, after the previous battle, heavy damage remains here. The edge is blunt, suitable for stabbing strikes, but unreliable for cutting. Then he rests briefly and drinks sparingly, realizing that his supplies in the tunnel may not last long. A faint sound echoes in the shaft, and he involuntarily pays attention. It sounds like metal striking stone, meaning someone is working deeper inside. He thinks about extinguishing his light to avoid danger, but hesitates. He does not know whether what is there belongs to a monster or a human. Looking down into the tunnel, he notices a sturdy figure in armor standing under a dim glow. The stranger looks calm, not hostile. The armored silhouette raises a hand in greeting and freezes motionless in the narrow passage. After a short pause, he cautiously repeats the gesture, deciding to respond peacefully instead of preparing for battle. The doctor confirms that he is human. Relieved, they speak the same language. The armored dwarf scrutinizes him, examining his appearance closely. Suddenly, the dwarf sharply asks if his will to live is worth it. At the harsh warning, confusion spreads across the healer's face. The dwarf says that this place is called the Cave of Death. Black powder fills the tunnels, a substance that kills all living beings. He learns that the powder infects bare skin and slowly destroys the body. To survive inside, protective clothing and a mask are needed. Covering his face, the healer straightens up and realizes the danger of staying in the cave unprepared. The dwarf, introducing himself as Brock, asks the healer to move quietly. He does not know how to get out. They make their way through a dark mine tunnel, lit only by small lamps. The air grows cold and broken rails and debris stretch ahead. During the walk, the healer admits that he cannot use wind magic. Brock explains, here in the deadly tunnels, conversations happen very rarely. To prevent the toxic powder from spreading, Brock activates wind magic. The wind clears the path and the dust scatters away from them. Then he shows this is an abandoned mining tunnel, long forgotten beneath the sanctuary itself. The doctor asks why Brock came back for him instead of continuing his work. Dust and scattered stones fly from the mine path as they walk. Brock calmly explains that the task was not urgent and that the healer caught his attention. He recalls how at first he took the healer for a cold, and then realized it was all simply because of his recklessness. He was entering the Cave of Death without preparation. They stop before huge doors deep inside the tunnel. This is not an exit, just a place safe enough to rest briefly. With a sweeping gesture, Brock points to the entrance of a hidden dwarven settlement further beyond the visible.